The ancient world is often described as distant, but in many ways it is surprisingly close. Its roads became the foundations of modern routes. Its cities evolved into modern settlements. Its monuments still dominate the landscapes where they were first built. And yet, despite this connection, vast parts of that world remain unfamiliar. Archaeologists can trace trade networks across continents, identify construction techniques, and reconstruct entire urban layouts, but there are still moments where the evidence suddenly stops. A project left unfinished, a city abandoned without explanation, a technology that appears in the record and then disappears. These gaps are where ancient mysteries are born. They remind us that history is not a continuous story. It is a story with missing pages, and some of those pages may never be found. La Hougue Bie is a prehistoric monument on the island of Jersey in the English Channel, positioned between Britain and France. At first glance, it appears to be nothing more than a grassy mound rising gently above the surrounding countryside. Yet hidden beneath that mound lies one of the most extraordinary engineering achievements of the Neolithic world. Constructed around 4,000–3,500 BCE, more than 5.5 millennia ago, La Hougue Bie is older than Stonehenge by roughly 1,000 years and predates the Great Pyramid of Giza by several centuries. The monument has survived thousands of years of storms, climate fluctuations, erosion, and human activity. But the greatest mystery is not its age. The greatest mystery is how a society without metal tools, written mathematics, or known surveying instruments created a structure whose astronomical precision continues to challenge modern explanations. The monument became widely known to archaeology during excavations conducted in the early 20th century, when researchers opened the enormous earthen mound and revealed a long stone passage leading deep into a central burial chamber. What they discovered transformed La Hougue Bie from a local curiosity into one of Europe's most important prehistoric sites. Beneath tens of thousands of tons of earth stood a carefully engineered stone corridor, approximately 18 meters long, constructed from massive megalithic slabs weighing several tons each. The scale alone was impressive, but the alignment of the passage proved even more remarkable. Twice each year, near the spring and autumn equinoxes, the rising sun sends a beam of light directly through the narrow entrance of the monument. The light travels the entire length of the passage and illuminates the innermost chamber. This phenomenon lasts only a short period and depends upon an astonishing degree of accuracy. A deviation of only a few degrees in the orientation of the structure would prevent the sunlight from reaching the chamber. Yet builders working more than 5,000 years ago achieved an alignment precise enough to create this effect without modern instruments, optical devices, compasses, or written astronomical records. The engineering challenge behind such an alignment is difficult to overstate. The apparent position of the sunrise changes continuously throughout the year. To identify the exact direction associated with the equinoxes, ancient observers would have needed years, perhaps generations of systematic observations. They would have needed to mark points on the horizon, compare seasonal changes, and determine a stable reference line that could guide construction. Modern surveyors use calibrated instruments capable of measuring angles to fractions of a degree. The builders of La Hougue Bie apparently accomplished a comparable task using methods that remain largely unknown. Archaeologists often compare La Hougue Bie with other famous astronomical monuments such as Newgrange in Ireland. Newgrange is aligned with the winter solstice sunrise, allowing sunlight to penetrate its chamber during a brief period in December. However, Newgrange was constructed approximately 5 centuries later than La Hougue Bie. This raises an intriguing question. If later monuments inherited astronomical knowledge from earlier traditions, could La Hougue Bie represent part of a much older network of scientific understanding stretching across Atlantic Europe? Similar passage graves appear from Portugal to Ireland, many displaying evidence of celestial alignments. The pattern suggests that Neolithic societies may have shared surprisingly sophisticated observational knowledge across distances of thousands of kilometers. The mystery deepens when examining the monument's physical construction. The passage and burial chamber were built using massive stone slabs transported without wheeled vehicles, iron tools, cranes, or draft animals capable of heavy hauling. Some of the stones weigh several tons. Even today, moving such blocks requires careful planning and mechanical assistance. Experimental archaeologists have demonstrated that teams using ropes, wooden sledges and rollers can transport large stones, but these experiments often require modern coordination, modern safety practices, and precise engineering calculations. Exactly how Neolithic communities organized labor on the scale necessary for La Hougue Bie remains uncertain. The mound itself presents another engineering puzzle. Estimates suggest that tens of thousands of tons of earth and stone were placed over the chamber after construction. Such a mass exerts enormous downward pressure. If distributed incorrectly, the roof slabs would crack or collapse. Yet the chamber has remained intact for more than 5 millennia. This indicates a sophisticated understanding of load distribution and structural stability. The builders may not have possessed theoretical physics, but their practical knowledge of weight, balance, and foundation behavior was clearly extensive. The monument functions almost like a giant prehistoric pressure management system, protecting the chamber beneath a massive artificial hill. Comparison with later civilizations makes the achievement even more striking. The Egyptians used copper tools, organized state labor forces, and written administrative systems when constructing pyramids. Roman engineers employed geometry, standardized measurements, and advanced construction techniques. The builders of La Hougue Bie possessed none of these advantages, yet they still produced a monument whose orientation and longevity rival some of the most celebrated structures of the ancient world. The difference is not merely chronological, it challenges assumptions about the technological capabilities of early farming societies. Recent studies of Neolithic monuments have increasingly suggested that prehistoric communities possessed a far deeper understanding of landscape geometry than previously believed. Researchers examining passage graves across Europe have identified recurring patterns of orientation towards celestial events, topographic features, and seasonal markers. Some alignments appear too consistent to be accidental. At La Hougue Bie, the solar phenomenon is particularly difficult to dismiss as coincidence because of the length and narrowness of the passage. The corridor effectively functions as a giant observational instrument. It transforms sunlight into a measurable event, marking a specific moment within the annual cycle. In modern terms, it behaves almost like a calendar encoded into architecture. This has led some scholars to propose that monuments such as La Hougue Bie were never intended to serve solely as tombs. The traditional interpretation views them as burial sites for important individuals or ancestral groups. Yet the extraordinary investment of labour, the precise astronomical alignment, and the monument's dominant position within the landscape suggest additional functions. It may have operated simultaneously as a ceremonial centre, a seasonal marker, a symbol of political authority, and a repository of astronomical knowledge. The structure appears to communicate information through stone and sunlight, creating an experience that would have been both practical and profoundly symbolic. Another mystery is how knowledge was passed down. Building La Hougue Bie required skills in astronomy, engineering, and organization that likely developed over generations. Without written records, this knowledge had to be preserved through observation, memory, and oral tradition. How it survived and remained so accurate is still unknown. Do you think La Hugo-Bie was simply a tomb, or was it an ancient monument designed to preserve astronomical knowledge thousands of years ahead of its time? Share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you believe its true purpose was? Sera is a tiny island in the Gulf of Mirabello, off the northeastern coast of Crete. Barely visible on most maps and measuring only a few square kilometers, it seems an unlikely place for one of the most sophisticated maritime communities of the Bronze Age. Yet beneath its rocky hills lies evidence of a civilization whose engineering, trade networks, and urban planning continue to challenge archaeologists today. The site was first identified in the late 19th century and later excavated extensively by archaeologists seeking to understand the wider world of Minoan Crete. What they uncovered was unexpected. Instead of a simple fishing settlement, Sera revealed itself as a thriving harbour town occupied primarily between roughly 1900 and 1450 BCE. Streets, workshops, storage facilities, elite residences, and imported goods emerged from the soil, suggesting a level of economic complexity far beyond what most would expect from a small island with limited resources. The discovery immediately raised a fundamental question. How did such an isolated and environmentally constrained location become an important node within one of the most advanced civilizations of the ancient Mediterranean? The first mystery begins with survival itself. Sera is a dry island. Unlike major settlements situated near rivers, springs, or fertile plains, the inhabitants of Sera lived in an environment where fresh water was scarce and agricultural land was limited. Modern surveys indicate that annual rainfall in eastern Crete is relatively low compared with many other Mediterranean regions. Yet archaeological evidence suggests that hundreds, perhaps thousands of people occupied the settlement during its peak. Storage installations, domestic architecture, and industrial facilities all indicate long-term habitation rather than temporary seasonal occupation. The challenge is difficult to overstate. Every litre of water had to be collected, stored, protected, and distributed. Excavations revealed sophisticated systems of cisterns, channels, and collection surfaces integrated directly into the architecture of the town. Rainwater harvesting appears to have been practiced on a scale remarkable for the period. Roofs, courtyards, and paved surfaces were carefully designed to direct runoff towards storage facilities. Some researchers have compared the efficiency of these systems to later water management strategies used in arid regions of the Roman Empire. Yet no written engineering manuals survive to explain how these designs were calculated. The result suggests a practical understanding of hydrology that remains largely invisible in the archaeological record. Equally intriguing is the layout of the settlement itself. When the site was mapped in detail, archaeologists noticed that many of the streets followed logical routes optimized for movement across steep terrain. The arrangement does not appear entirely random, nor does it resemble the uncontrolled growth typical of many early settlements. Instead, certain sectors display evidence of planning. Pathways connect storage areas to harbour facilities. Residential districts occupy advantageous elevations. Drainage routes appear integrated into the urban fabric. Such planning raises difficult questions about measurement and surveying during the Bronze Age. Modern engineers rely on precise instruments to calculate gradients and optimize infrastructure. The inhabitants of Sera possessed no known compasses, levels, or advanced surveying equipment. Nevertheless, they successfully constructed a settlement capable of functioning efficiently within a challenging landscape. Similar patterns are observed at larger Minoan centres such as Knossos and Malia, suggesting that urban planning may have been a more advanced discipline within Minoan society than previously assumed. The architecture presents another puzzle. Crete lies within one of the most seismically active regions of the Mediterranean. Geological studies indicate that major earthquakes have repeatedly struck the island throughout history. Ancient settlements faced constant danger from seismic activity. Yet many structures at Seira survived long enough to undergo renovation, expansion, and continuous occupation across generations. Detailed examination of surviving walls reveals construction techniques that appear surprisingly resilient. Builders frequently employed composite masonry systems consisting of larger outer stones combined with smaller infill material. The resulting structures were not rigid monoliths, but flexible assemblies capable of dissipating stress. Some engineers have suggested that these methods may have unintentionally provided a degree of earthquake resistance. While not equivalent to modern seismic engineering, the approach demonstrates a practical understanding of structural behavior gained through centuries of experience. Similar adaptive techniques can be observed at other Minoan sites, hinting at a broader tradition of construction knowledge that was never formally recorded. The industrial evidence from Seira deepens the mystery. Excavations uncovered workshops associated with pottery production, storage, processing activities, and various crafts. Specialized production requires organization, labor management, and supply chains. Raw materials needed to be imported or transported. Finished goods required distribution. Such activities imply the existence of administrative systems capable of coordinating complex economic operations. Yet unlike modern societies, the Minoans left behind few easily decipherable records. Their script, known as Linear A, remains undeciphered despite decades of research. Archaeologists know that records existed. Clay tablets and inscriptions confirm that information was being stored and transmitted. However, the actual content remains inaccessible. It is as though historians discovered a modern corporation's archives but lost the key required to read every document. Consequently, the mechanisms that govern production, taxation, inventory management, and trade remain among the greatest unresolved mysteries of Bronze Age archaeology. Nothing, however, is more astonishing than the evidence for maritime trade. This is where the story of Seira becomes truly extraordinary. Archaeological analysis has identified imported materials and artifacts originating from multiple regions of the Eastern Mediterranean. Pottery styles connect the settlement to other parts of Crete, the Cycladic Islands, and distant coastal communities. Scientific studies of ceramic composition indicate movement of goods across hundreds of kilometers of open water. Exotic materials likely traveled through networks extending toward the Levant and Egypt. For a small island settlement, the scale of connectivity is remarkable. Bronze Age sailors lacked magnetic compasses. They possessed no sextants, chronometers, or accurate nautical charts. GPS would remain unimaginable for another 3.5 millennia, yet Minoan ships routinely crossed the Aegean Sea, one of the most geographically complex maritime environments in the world. The Aegean contains thousands of islands, unpredictable winds, seasonal weather shifts, and powerful currents. Successful navigation required extraordinary precision. A vessel drifting only a few degrees off course could miss its destination entirely. Nevertheless, trade networks operated consistently enough to support specialized economies and sustained cultural exchange across vast distances. How was such navigation achieved? One theory suggests that Minoan sailors developed an accumulated body of environmental knowledge rivaling modern indigenous navigation traditions. Mariners may have memorized seasonal wind patterns, observed cloud formations, tracked wave behavior, and used celestial bodies as navigational references. Some researchers compare these possibilities to the sophisticated non-instrument navigation practiced by Polynesian voyagers, who crossed thousands of kilometers of Pacific Ocean using stars, swells, birds, and environmental cues. The comparison is striking. Polynesian navigators operated without modern instruments, yet successfully reached islands separated by enormous distances. If similar observational systems existed among Minoan sailors, they may explain how settlements like Sierra remained integrated into a vast maritime network. The problem is that direct evidence for these navigational methods has almost entirely vanished. Knowledge transmitted orally leaves few traces in the archaeological record. But what do you think? Was Sierra's success simply the result of centuries of accumulated experience? Or did the Minoans possess navigational and engineering knowledge far more advanced than we currently understand? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Mont-Lassois is a hilltop site in Burgundy, eastern France, that seems unlikely for the world of early Iron Age Europe. Around 500 BC, centuries before the rise of Rome as a continental power, this fortified settlement overlooked the Upper Seine Valley and controlled one of the most important trade routes linking the Mediterranean to northern Europe. At first glance, Mont-Lassois appears to be just another Celtic stronghold, yet buried beneath its slopes was evidence of astonishing wealth, sophisticated engineering, long-distance commerce, and metallurgical knowledge that continues to challenge modern understanding. The greatest mystery is not that Mont-Lassois became powerful. The mystery is how a society traditionally described as tribal and technologically limited managed to acquire, produce, and manipulate materials with a level of precision that rivals some of the most advanced cultures of its age. The modern story began in January 1953 when local archaeologist René Geoffroy excavated a burial mound near the village of Vix at the foot of Mont-Lassois. What he uncovered became one of the most sensational archaeological discoveries ever made in Europe. Inside a chamber tomb lay the remains of a woman approximately 30 to 35 years old, buried around 500 BC. She was surrounded by extraordinary wealth. The grave contained a massive gold torque weighing nearly 480 grams, imported luxury objects from the Mediterranean world, a ceremonial wagon, and most astonishing of all, a gigantic bronze crater standing 1.64 meters high and weighing more than 208 kilograms. Even today, it remains the largest known bronze vessel ever produced in the ancient Greek world. The discovery immediately transformed scholarly understanding of Iron Age Europe. Instead of isolated tribal communities, archaeologists were suddenly looking at evidence for an elite center connected to international trade networks stretching thousands of kilometers. Excavations continued throughout the second half of the 20th century and accelerated during the 1990s and 2000s. Archaeologists from France, Germany, and Austria uncovered evidence that Mont-Lassois was not simply a burial site, but the center of a large fortified settlement covering more than 40 hectares. Surveys revealed defensive walls, residential districts, storage facilities, workshops, and what appeared to be a monumental elite residence. One of the most shocking discoveries emerged between 2002 and 2006, when excavations exposed the remains of a massive apsidal building, often called the Palace of Vix. Measuring approximately 35 meters long and over 20 meters wide, the structure was among the largest known buildings north of the Alps during the Hallstatt period. Its scale immediately raised difficult questions. Constructing a wooden building of that size required careful planning, sophisticated carpentry, large quantities of timber, and an understanding of structural loads that researchers still struggle to reconstruct fully. Yet architecture is only one part of the mystery. The location of Mont-Lassois itself presents another puzzle. The settlement occupied a strategic position overlooking the Seine River system. This allowed its inhabitants to control trade moving between the Mediterranean and northern Europe. Archaeological finds include Greek ceramics, Etruscan bronze objects, Mediterranean wine containers, Baltic amber, coral from southern waters, and local metal products. Such discoveries indicate participation in exchange networks extending over distances exceeding 1,500 kilometers. Maintaining those connections required political organization, logistical planning, and economic coordination on a scale rarely associated with Iron Age Celtic societies. Scholars continue debating whether Mont-la-Soie functioned as a regional capital, a ceremonial centre, a trading hub, or all three simultaneously. The enormous Vix crater remains one of archaeology's greatest transportation mysteries. Scientific analysis indicates that the vessel was produced in the Greek world, probably in southern Italy, or a Greek colony during the late 6th century BC. Its manufacture alone required exceptional skill. The body was hammered from a single bronze sheet weighing hundreds of kilograms. Decorative handles were cast separately and attached with remarkable precision. The lid featured an intricate bronze sculpture. Moving such an object from the Mediterranean to inland France would have been an extraordinary undertaking. The route likely involved both maritime and river transport, followed by overland movement across difficult terrain. Even with modern replicas, researchers have demonstrated that transporting a vessel of similar dimensions requires careful weight distribution and coordinated labour. Yet no written records explain how Iron Age traders accomplished this feat. The deeper archaeologists investigated Mont-la-Soie, however, the more they encountered evidence suggesting that imported luxury goods were only part of the story. Local craftspeople themselves appear to have possessed technological abilities far beyond traditional assumptions. This is especially true in metallurgy, the field that remains perhaps the site's greatest unsolved mystery. The Vix burial contained not only imported objects, but also locally produced metalwork of exceptional quality. Detailed analysis of the gold torque revealed advanced manufacturing techniques, including controlled hammering, precise shaping, soldering, and decorative finishing. The object weighs nearly half a kilogram, yet its symmetry is remarkably consistent. Producing such a piece required careful control over material properties and repeated heating cycles. Gold becomes brittle if improperly worked, meaning craftsmen needed practical knowledge of annealing temperatures long before scientific metallurgy existed. How that knowledge was acquired and transmitted remains uncertain. Even more intriguing are the broader metallurgical capabilities implied by the settlement. Excavations across Mont-la-Soie have recovered evidence for iron working, bronze casting, and metal finishing. During the 6th century BC, iron technology was still relatively young in much of Europe. Smelting iron required furnace temperatures exceeding 1,150 degrees Celsius. Maintaining such temperatures demanded precise airflow control, carefully selected charcoal, and specialized furnace designs. Unlike bronze, iron cannot simply be melted and poured using basic methods. It must be reduced from ore through a complex chemical process. Archaeologists understand the general principles involved, but the efficiency achieved by Hallstatt metalworkers continues to surprise researchers. Chemical analyses of artifacts from the region reveal relatively consistent alloy compositions. This suggests some degree of quality control during production. Yet no written instructions, technical manuals, or engineering drawings survive. The craftsmen of Mont-la-Soie somehow mastered processes that required control over variables invisible to the naked eye. Modern metallurgists can explain what happened inside the furnaces, but explaining how Iron Age workers discovered these methods through experimentation alone is considerably more difficult. Another unresolved question involves raw material acquisition. Producing elite objects required access to high-quality ores and extensive trade connections. isotopic studies suggest that metals found at sites associated with the Hallstatt world originated from multiple geological sources. This indicates the existence of supply networks extending across large portions of Europe. Coordinating extraction, transport, refining, and production would have required organizational systems far more sophisticated than traditionally envisioned. Some scholars compare these networks to miniature versions of the later commercial systems that emerged under Roman influence. The craftsmanship displayed on certain objects has led researchers to propose the existence of highly specialized artisans working full-time rather than part-time village craftsmen. If true, this would imply a degree of economic complexity approaching early urban societies. Yet direct evidence for how such workshops operated remains scarce. Were skills transmitted through apprenticeships? Did elite families sponsor specialist craftsmen? Were foreign artisans brought to Mont-la-Soie from Mediterranean regions? The archaeological record offers clues but no definitive answers. Adding to the mystery is the sudden decline of the site. Around the late 5th century BC, Mont-la-Soie lost much of its prominence. Construction slowed. Long-distance imports became less common. Political power shifted elsewhere. Archaeologists have found no clear evidence of catastrophic destruction, major warfare, or natural disaster capable of explaining the transformation. One of Europe's most influential Iron Age centres simply faded from its dominant position. The reasons remain debated today. On the southern coast of Crete, facing the open waters of the Libyan Sea, lies the ancient site of Komos. Today it appears little more than a field of stone foundations overlooking a quiet beach. Yet when archaeologists began systematic excavations in the 1970s, they uncovered something unexpected. Beneath the sand lay the remains of what may have been one of the most important maritime centres of the Bronze Age Mediterranean. Unlike Knossos, Phaistos, or other famous Minoan palaces, Komos was not built to dominate the landscape. It was built to connect worlds, and the deeper researchers dug, the more they encountered a technological mystery that remains unresolved today. How did a civilization more than 3,500 years ago construct and operate a harbour complex whose scale, organisation and international reach appear centuries ahead of what many historians once believed possible? The first clues emerged from the enormous buildings uncovered near the ancient shoreline. Some of these structures were unlike ordinary Minoan houses. One complex stretched more than 50 meters in length. Massive walls, large open spaces and unusual layout suggested that these were not residences but specialized facilities. Archaeologists soon realized that Komos was not simply a coastal settlement. It functioned as a gateway between Crete and the wider Mediterranean world. Imported pottery from Egypt, Cyprus, the Levant and mainland Greece appeared throughout the site. Chemical analyses of ceramics demonstrated that goods were arriving from hundreds and sometimes thousands of kilometers away. Such evidence revealed a level of international commerce comparable to later Phoenician trading ports. Yet it existed during a period when most European societies remained small agricultural communities. What makes Komos particularly mysterious is its apparent role as a harbour. The settlement occupied a strategic position along major sea routes, connecting the eastern Mediterranean. Ships travelling between Egypt, the Near East, and the Aegean would have passed nearby. Yet despite decades of research, archaeologists still cannot fully explain how the harbour functioned. Modern coastlines rarely preserve ancient maritime infrastructure intact. Sea levels change, sediments accumulate, storms reshape entire shorelines. At Komos, the original harbour installations appear to have been altered or buried by thousands of years of geological activity. As a result, researchers can identify the existence of a major port but struggle to reconstruct the engineering systems that allowed it to operate. This problem becomes even more intriguing when one considers the environmental challenges facing Bronze Age sailors. The Libyan Sea is not a sheltered bay. Seasonal winds can generate powerful waves capable of damaging vessels and eroding coastlines. Modern ports often rely on extensive breakwaters, seawalls, and dredging operations to maintain navigable channels. Yet no massive harbour defences comparable to those seen in later Roman ports have been discovered at Commos. This creates a technological puzzle. If large numbers of ships were regularly arriving and departing, how were they protected from storms? Some researchers propose that ancient coastal configurations created natural shelter now lost beneath changing sediments. Others suggest that engineering features remain hidden beneath offshore deposits. Neither explanation has been conclusively demonstrated. The largest buildings at Commos raise even deeper questions. Several scholars have proposed that these structures functioned as ship sheds. If true, they would represent some of the earliest large-scale maritime maintenance facilities known anywhere in the world. The idea is based on the unusual dimensions of the buildings, which seem capable of accommodating long wooden vessels, yet the evidence remains incomplete. No preserved ships survive within the structures. No definitive launching ramps have been identified. The buildings resemble ship sheds in some respects and differ in others. Consequently, one of the most important questions remains unanswered. Were these among humanity's earliest naval engineering facilities, or were they something entirely different? The ship shed hypothesis becomes even more remarkable when calculations are considered. Reconstructions of Minoan merchant vessels suggest lengths ranging from 20 to 30 meters, with loaded weights potentially reaching several tens of tons. Moving such ships out of the water for repair would have required sophisticated logistical systems. Rollers, sledges, ramps, ropes, coordinated labour forces, and carefully prepared surfaces would all have been necessary. Yet almost none of these components survive archaeologically. The buildings exist, the maritime evidence exists, the ships are known from artistic depictions and indirect remains. The mechanisms connecting these elements have largely vanished. What remains is a technological shadow hinting at capabilities that archaeologists can infer but not directly observe. Another mystery concerns the management of trade itself. Commos appears to have handled enormous quantities of goods moving across the Mediterranean. Storage areas, warehouses, and imported materials indicate continuous commercial activity. This raises an organizational challenge. Modern ports depend upon written records, inventories, manifests, schedules, and bureaucratic administration. The Minoans possessed writing systems such as Linear A, yet that script remains undeciphered. As a result, archaeologists can identify the physical infrastructure of trade, but cannot read the instructions that governed it. Thousands of storage jars have been discovered throughout Minoan sites. Commodities such as olive oil, wine, textiles, metals, and agricultural products likely passed through Commos. But the methods used to track, allocate, and distribute these resources remain hidden behind an undeciphered language. The technological sophistication implied by this trade network becomes even clearer when compared with other Bronze Age societies. During the 2nd millennium BCE, maritime routes linked Egypt, the Levant, Cyprus, Anatolia, and the Aegean into a vast interconnected system. Commos occupied a strategic position within that network. Goods arriving from distant regions demonstrate that sailors regularly crossed hundreds of kilometers of open sea. Some voyages exceeded 1,000 kilometers. Navigating such distances required knowledge of winds, currents, seasonal weather patterns, and celestial observations. Yet no surviving Minoan navigation manuals exist. Unlike later Greek and Roman writers, The Minoans left no readable descriptions explaining how they crossed the sea. Their success is visible through archaeology, but the knowledge that made it possible remains largely invisible. Even the construction methods used at Komos continue to provoke debate. The settlement survived for centuries despite earthquakes, changing coastlines, and fluctuating political conditions. Builders repeatedly modified structures, expanded facilities, and adapted to environmental challenges. Geological studies indicate that southern Crete experiences significant seismic activity due to its position near active tectonic boundaries. Maintaining large coastal buildings in such an environment would have required practical engineering solutions. Yet because most structures survive only as foundations, many details of their upper architecture remain unknown. Archaeologists can reconstruct outlines and dimensions, but the complete technological system behind these buildings has disappeared. Then came the decline. During the Late Bronze Age, the Minoan world experienced profound disruption. Earthquakes, political upheaval, changing trade patterns, and the broader instability affecting the Eastern Mediterranean transformed regional networks. The eruption of Thera, one of the largest volcanic events of the ancient world, occurred within this era of upheaval. Although direct links between the eruption and Komos remain debated, the wider consequences were enormous. Trade routes shifted, power centers changed, maritime connections weakened. Eventually, the great harbour complex lost the role that had once made it indispensable. Yet Komos did not disappear entirely. Centuries later, new inhabitants established sanctuaries on the site. Archaeologists discovered evidence of Phoenician influence, alongside Greek material culture. This continuity creates another mystery. Knowledge appears to have persisted across cultural transitions. Maritime traditions survived. International contacts continued. Somehow, fragments of earlier expertise remained embedded within the region long after the original Minoan system had faded. Poggio Civitate stands on a remote hill near Merlo in Tuscany, central Italy. From a distance it looks unremarkable, just another ridge overlooking rolling farmland. Yet beneath this quiet landscape lies one of the greatest engineering mysteries of pre-Roman Europe. Long before Rome became an empire, before the Colosseum, before Roman concrete transformed architecture, builders at Poggio Civitate created a monumental complex whose scale, organization, and technological sophistication continue to challenge archaeologists today. The mystery is not simply who built it. The mystery is how a society operating in the 7th century BCE achieved levels of planning, industrial production, and architectural precision that seem centuries ahead of their time. The site remained unknown until the 1960s, when excavations led by archaeologist Kyle Meredith Phillips uncovered enormous quantities of burned roof tiles, terracotta sculptures, and architectural remains buried beneath the hilltop. What initially appeared to be scattered debris soon revealed the remains of one of the largest known Etruscan monumental complexes ever discovered. As excavation expanded, archaeologists realized they were not looking at an ordinary settlement. They had uncovered evidence of a highly organized center whose existence forced scholars to rethink the technological capabilities of early Etruscan civilization. The first mystery emerged from the scale of construction itself. During the 7th century BCE, much of Europe was dominated by small agricultural communities and tribal settlements. Monumental architecture existed in places such as Greece, Egypt, and Mesopotamia, but central Italy was not expected to possess comparable levels of architectural organization. Yet Poggio Civitate contained a massive complex arranged around a central courtyard, measuring roughly 60 meters on each side. The building covered thousands of square meters and required enormous quantities of timber, clay, stone, and labor. Such a project would have demanded not only skilled architects, but also a sophisticated administrative system capable of coordinating resources over many years. The geometric precision of the complex raises additional questions. Excavations indicate that the structure followed a carefully planned layout rather than growing organically over time. Walls align with remarkable consistency, and the courtyard design suggests advanced surveying techniques. Modern engineers understand how difficult it is to maintain geometric accuracy across large construction projects, even when using standardized measuring equipment. Yet no direct evidence survives explaining exactly how Etruscan builders established and maintained these alignments. The precision is particularly striking when compared to contemporary settlements across much of Iron Age Europe, where architecture often followed irregular patterns shaped by terrain rather than centralized planning. Evidence of industrial-scale production appears throughout the site. Thousands of roof tiles were recovered during excavations. Scientific analysis revealed extraordinary levels of standardization. Individual tiles show dimensions and shapes consistent with mass production rather than small-scale, handcrafted manufacture. This presents a major technological puzzle. Producing thousands of nearly identical ceramic components requires precise molds, controlled clay preparation, standardized firing procedures, and quality control systems capable of minimizing variation. Such manufacturing methods resemble processes associated with much later urban societies. Even today, ceramic production depends heavily on controlling moisture content, firing temperatures, and cooling rates. Achieving consistency on the scale seen at Poggio Civitate suggests an unexpectedly advanced understanding of materials engineering. The roofing system itself was revolutionary. The structure was protected by one of the most elaborate terracotta roof systems known from the ancient Mediterranean during this period. Roofs are often overlooked in archaeology, yet they represent some of the most technically demanding elements of construction. A large roof must distribute weight evenly, resist weather, manage drainage, and survive decades of environmental stress. At Poggio Civitate, builders created a system combining thousands of ceramic components into a unified architectural structure. The engineering challenge becomes even more impressive when considering that the roof stood above a massive wooden framework. Every tile, beam, and support element had to function together with remarkable precision. But the greatest mystery of Poggio Civitate was discovered not beneath the roof, but on top of it. Scattered among the debris were fragments of enormous terracotta sculptures, unlike anything expected from an Iron Age settlement. Over decades, archaeologists reconstructed a series of seated human figures that once stood along the ridges of the roof. Some reached approximately 1 meter in height. Their distinctive wide-brimmed hats and rigid posture have become iconic symbols of the site. Yet these statues present one of the most perplexing technological puzzles in Etruscan archaeology. Large terracotta sculptures are extremely difficult to manufacture. Clay shrinks as it dries, it shrinks again during firing. Internal stresses develop throughout the process. Uneven drying can cause warping. Rapid heating can create fractures. Improper cooling can destroy weeks of work in a matter of minutes. Modern ceramic artists understand that increasing the size of a sculpture dramatically increases the probability of structural failure. Yet the artisans of Poggio Civitate consistently produced monumental figures capable of surviving firing, transportation, installation, and decades of exposure atop a roof. Researchers have attempted to understand the manufacturing process through microscopic analysis of surviving fragments. The clay appears carefully prepared, containing inclusions that may have helped reduce thermal stress. Some scholars believe artisans assembled the statues from multiple sections before joining them together. Others argue that highly specialized firing methods were used to ensure even temperature distribution. However, no complete workshop has been discovered that fully explains how these sculptures were produced. The technology behind their manufacture remains partially hidden. Their placement creates another mystery. These figures were not displayed inside temples or protected buildings. They were mounted high above the structure, where few people could examine them closely. Creating sculptures of such scale required immense labor, fuel, expertise, and resources. Why invest so much effort into objects intended primarily for distant viewing? Some researchers argue that the statues functioned as symbols of political authority. Others suggest they represented ancestors, elites, or supernatural guardians, yet no interpretation fully explains why a community devoted extraordinary technological resources to architectural decoration on such a scale. The sophistication of the terracotta program becomes even more remarkable when compared with contemporary cultures. During the 7th century BCE, many European societies produced ceramics primarily for domestic use. Monumental fired clay sculpture remained relatively rare. The seated figures of Poggio Civitate therefore represent not merely artistic achievements, but evidence of specialized knowledge concentrated within a highly organized community. They reveal an ability to manipulate materials at a level far beyond what traditional models of early Etruscan society once assumed. Further evidence of technological complexity emerged from workshops discovered at the site. Excavations revealed traces of textile production, metalworking, woodworking, and craft specialization. Iron tools, bronze artifacts, manufacturing debris, and production equipment indicate a community operating more like an industrial center than an isolated aristocratic residence. Such activities required coordinated supply networks extending across the region. Raw materials had to be acquired, transported, processed, and distributed. The existence of this workshop suggests an economic system far more sophisticated than previously imagined. Around the end of the 7th century BCE, a massive fire devastated much of the complex. Archaeologists still debate whether it was accidental, political, military, or ritual. Rather than abandoning the site, however, its inhabitants chose to rebuild. Colonna is a low hill rising from the northwestern coast of Aegina Island in Greece, barely visible above the blue waters of the Saronic Gulf. At first glance, it seems insignificant compared with the palaces of Crete, the citadels of Mycenae, or the legendary ruins of Troy. Yet beneath this modest mound lies one of the most perplexing technological stories of the ancient Aegean. For more than 7,000 years, people repeatedly built, rebuilt, and transformed this settlement. Long before the emergence of classical Greece, long before the Parthenon, and even before the great Minoan palaces reached their peak, Colonna appears to have become a center of engineering, metallurgy, maritime trade, and urban planning whose sophistication continues to challenge conventional explanations. The site first attracted scholarly attention in the 19th century, when travelers noticed unusual ancient remains scattered across the hill. Systematic excavations began in the early 20th century under German and Austrian archaeologists, revealing an extraordinary sequence of occupation layers stretching from the Neolithic period around 5000 BC through the Bronze Age. Excavators eventually identified more than 10 major settlement phases stacked one above another. Few sites in the Aegean preserve such a continuous record of technological and social development. Every new layer seemed to reveal another surprise, suggesting that Colonna was not merely a village but one of the most influential centers in the prehistoric Eastern Mediterranean. The first mystery emerges from the scale of construction itself. During the early Bronze Age, around 2500–2300 BC, most communities in the Aegean consisted of relatively small settlements with modest architecture. Yet at Colonna, archaeologists uncovered a massive structure known as the White House. Despite its modern nickname, the building bears no relation to the famous American landmark. What astonished researchers was its complexity. The structure contained multiple rooms, thick stone walls, carefully organized storage areas, and a layout that suggests centralized administration. The building occupied a dominant position within the settlement and required enormous labor investment. Comparisons reveal why this discovery is so puzzling. The White House predates many of the monumental architectural achievements traditionally associated with the Minoan civilization on Crete. At a time when much of the region was still organized into small agricultural communities, Colonna appears to have constructed something approaching a proto-palatial building. Archaeologists examining its foundations discovered evidence of deliberate structural planning. Large stones were selected and arranged in ways that distributed weight efficiently. The walls were not random accumulations of rubble, but carefully engineered systems designed for stability. The builders seem to have possessed practical knowledge of load-bearing architecture centuries before such concepts appear in written historical records. The mystery deepens when examining Colonna's fortifications. Around the late 3rd millennium BC, the settlement became protected by massive defensive walls. Some sections reached thicknesses of approximately 4 to 5 meters. Multiple defensive circuits surrounded key areas of the site, creating a layered security system uncommon for the period. Strategic angles improved visibility and increased defensive effectiveness. Such planning implies not only architectural expertise, but also advanced understanding of military engineering. This presents an important historical problem. Comparable settlements throughout the Cyclades often lacked major fortifications. Many mainland Greek communities of the same period possessed little evidence of large-scale defensive construction. Why would a relatively small island settlement invest such immense resources into military architecture? One possibility is that the Aegean world was experiencing levels of maritime competition and conflict far greater than previously assumed. If true, Colonna may preserve evidence of an entire geopolitical landscape that has largely disappeared from the archaeological record. Its location offers another clue. Aegina occupies a strategic position between mainland Greece, the Peloponnese, the Cycladic Islands, and Crete. Modern shipping routes still recognize the importance of this region. Scientific analyses of materials recovered from Colonna reveal extensive trade connections. Obsidian originated from Melos, hundreds of kilometers away. Copper arrived from multiple sources. Pottery styles demonstrate interaction with distant communities across the Aegean. Such evidence indicates participation in a vast maritime network long before the rise of the famous Bronze Age kingdoms. The technological implications are profound. Moving significant quantities of stone, metals, and finished goods across open water required reliable vessels, navigational knowledge, and organizational systems capable of coordinating long-distance exchange. Yet, direct evidence remains frustratingly scarce. Wooden ships rarely survive for millennia beneath Mediterranean conditions. Archaeologists can observe the products of maritime technology, but possess very little of the technology itself. The result is a strange historical paradox. We know extensive sea trade existed because the artifacts prove it, but we still do not fully understand the vessels and navigational methods that made such trade possible. Among all of Colonna's enigmas, however, none is more significant than its role as a metallurgical center. This is where the site becomes truly extraordinary. During the early Bronze Age, copper represented one of humanity's most transformative technologies. Producing useful metal was not a simple task. Ore had to be identified, extracted, transported, crushed, heated, and refined under carefully controlled conditions. Even small variations in temperature or airflow could determine whether a smelting operation succeeded or failed. Excavations at Kelowna have uncovered evidence suggesting intensive metallurgical activity. Scientific analyses of copper artifacts indicate connections with multiple ore sources. Chemical signatures reveal complex supply networks extending beyond the island itself. Researchers have also identified remains associated with metal production, including slag and traces of high-temperature industrial processes. The evidence suggests that Kelowna was not merely consuming imported metals, but actively participating in transformation and manufacturing. The technological challenge involved should not be underestimated. Copper melts at approximately 1085 degrees Celsius. Achieving and maintaining such temperatures requires sophisticated furnace design and careful management of oxygen flow. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated that successful prehistoric smelting depends on remarkably precise control of combustion conditions. Yet the people of Kelowna appear to have mastered these processes more than 4,000 years ago. This raises a fundamental question. How did a relatively small island community acquire such expertise? Some scholars argue that technological knowledge spread through extensive exchange networks, linking the Aegean with Anatolia and the Near East. Others suggest that local experimentation played a larger role. Neither explanation fully resolves the mystery. The archaeological record demonstrates the presence of advanced metallurgical capabilities, but the pathways through which that knowledge developed remain unclear. The scale of metalworking also implies broader organizational complexity. Metallurgy requires specialists, specialists require food surpluses require efficient economic systems. In other words, copper production at Kelowna may indicate a society far more structured than archaeologists once imagined. The settlement begins to resemble an industrial and commercial hub, rather than a simple island village. Another mystery emerges from the site's remarkable continuity. Over thousands of years, successive generations repeatedly built upon earlier foundations. Excavators have documented more than 10 major settlement levels. New buildings often occupied exactly the same locations as older structures. This pattern suggests more than convenience. It implies transmission of technical knowledge across centuries. Builders appear to have understood which areas provided stable foundations and favorable conditions for construction. Maintaining such knowledge without extensive written records presents a fascinating puzzle. Modern engineering relies on documentation, plans, and mathematical calculations. Prehistoric societies depended on oral transmission and practical experience. Yet Kelowna's inhabitants managed to preserve architectural traditions across enormous spans of time. The consistency visible in the archaeological layers suggests a continuity of expertise that remains difficult to explain. The name Kelowna comes from a solitary column that once stood on the hill. Although the surviving column belongs to a later temple, the settlement's elevated location may have served as a landmark for sailors in the Saronic Gulf. Some researchers suggest Kelowna was not only a settlement but also an important maritime reference point, reflecting its long connection to the sea. Located in the Zaravshan Valley of present-day Tajikistan near the border with Uzbekistan, Sarazm is one of the most remarkable prehistoric settlements ever discovered in Central Asia. More than 5,500 years ago, this community emerged in a region once considered far removed from the world's earliest centers of civilization. Yet beneath its dusty plains lies evidence of a society whose technological achievements continue to surprise archaeologists. Long before the Silk Road connected Asia, before the rise of the great Persian empires, and while the first cities of Mesopotamia were still taking shape, Sarazm had already developed into a thriving centre of metallurgy, trade, architecture, and specialised production. The more researchers uncover about the site, the more puzzling it becomes that such a sophisticated society could have flourished so early and so far from the traditional heartlands of ancient civilization. The story of Sarazm's discovery began in 1976, when local farmer Ashurali Taylornoff noticed unusual stone tools while working the land. Archaeologists soon realized that they had uncovered one of Central Asia's most important prehistoric sites. Excavations eventually revealed a settlement covering approximately 90 to 100 hectares, making it one of the largest proto-urban centers in the region. Radiocarbon dating placed its occupation between roughly 3,500 and 2000 BCE. This means Sarazm flourished during the same period as the Uruk cities of Mesopotamia, and centuries before many societies in Central Asia were thought capable of supporting complex urban life. What immediately puzzled researchers was the scale of organization visible throughout the settlement. Sarazm was not a simple farming village. Excavations revealed residential quarters, production zones, storage areas, workshops, ceremonial spaces, and evidence of social differentiation. Such complexity is normally associated with large river civilizations possessing centralized administrations. Yet Sarazm developed in a semi-arid environment surrounded by mountains. Unlike Mesopotamia, there is no evidence for a powerful state bureaucracy directing construction or controlling resources. Nevertheless, the settlement appears to have functioned as a regional hub for centuries. How a community in this location accumulated enough wealth, labour, and technical knowledge to sustain such a settlement remains one of the site's greatest mysteries. The most remarkable puzzle revolves around metallurgy. Among all discoveries at Sarazm, none have generated more debate than the evidence for advanced copper production. Archaeologists uncovered furnaces, crucibles, moulds, slag deposits, and specialized workshop areas indicating large-scale metalworking activity. These finds demonstrate that metallurgy was not a minor craft practiced by a few individuals. It was a central component of the settlement's economy. The technological implications are extraordinary. Producing usable copper is far more difficult than simply collecting metal-bearing rocks. Copper ores must first be identified, extracted, crushed, sorted, heated, and smelted at temperatures often exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius. Maintaining such temperatures requires controlled airflow, carefully selected fuels, and extensive practical knowledge accumulated through generations of experimentation. Even small errors can ruin an entire batch of metal. Yet Sarazm's metalworkers consistently produce tools, ornaments, and weapons of impressive quality. Even more intriguing is the fact that many artifacts were not made from pure copper. Scientific analyses have revealed arsenical copper, leaded copper, and early alloy compositions. This suggests metallurgists understood that altering the chemical composition of metal could improve hardness, durability, or casting properties. Such knowledge resembles the experimental foundations that would eventually lead to the Bronze Age. The mystery is not that these people used metal. The mystery is how they acquired such sophisticated metallurgical expertise so early and so far from the major centers traditionally associated with technological innovation. Researchers continue to debate whether these alloy compositions were intentional. Some scholars argue that naturally occurring ore mixtures may explain the chemical signatures. Others point out that repeated consistency across artifacts suggests deliberate control. If intentional, Sarazm's metalworkers possessed an understanding of material properties that remains difficult to reconstruct. They left no written manuals, no technical diagrams, and no records explaining their methods. Their knowledge vanished while the product survived. Another unresolved question concerns the source of the raw materials. Isotopic analyses indicate that the copper used at Sarazm originated from multiple mining regions. Some sources appear linked to the Zaravshan Mountains, while others may trace back toward Afghanistan and neighbouring highland zones. Transporting heavy ore across rugged terrain would have required substantial logistical organisation. Yet there is no evidence of roads, wheeled transport systems on a large scale, or centralised governments coordinating such operations. Somehow, thousands of kilograms of raw material moved through some of the most challenging landscapes in Central Asia. The mystery deepens when examining the site's trade connections. Excavations have uncovered lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, turquoise from distant mining regions, marine shells originating hundreds of kilometers away, and carnelian beads associated with exchange networks extending toward the Indus Valley. These discoveries reveal a commercial system operating on a scale once thought impossible for the period. Some artifacts traveled distances exceeding 1,000 kilometers before arriving at Sarazm. To appreciate the significance of this network, consider that many later Bronze Age societies maintained trade routes of comparable length, only with the support of organized states and administrative institutions. Sarazm appears to have participated in similarly extensive exchange systems centuries earlier. Who coordinated these connections remains unknown. Were there professional merchants crossing mountains and deserts? Tribal alliances, seasonal caravans? Archaeology has not yet provided a definitive answer. The settlement's architecture introduces another layer of uncertainty. Excavations reveal substantial mud brick structures, large rectangular buildings, courtyards, and carefully organized activity zones. Certain layouts repeat throughout the site, suggesting that builders followed shared planning principles. Some structures contain walls exceeding 1 meter in thickness. Others display evidence of repeated renovation while maintaining similar geometric proportions. Such patterns imply the existence of construction knowledge passed between generations, yet Sarazm predates any known writing system in the region. Without written plans, how were architectural standards preserved across centuries? Some researchers propose the use of standardized measurements or practical geometric techniques. Others argue that skilled builders transmitted knowledge through apprenticeship systems. Whatever the mechanism, the consistency visible across the settlement suggests a level of engineering coordination rarely associated with prehistoric communities. Environmental adaptation presents another fascinating puzzle. Sarazm existed in a region vulnerable to climatic fluctuations, seasonal water variation, and seismic activity. Despite these challenges, the settlement survived for more than a millennium. Archaeological evidence suggests inhabitants managed water resources effectively and developed construction techniques capable of withstanding environmental stress. Some foundation designs incorporate layered materials that may have improved structural stability. Whether these features represent intentional engineering solutions or accumulated practical experience remains uncertain. Equally mysterious is the degree of labor specialization visible across the site. Excavators identified concentrations of beads, metalworking debris, pottery production waste, and stone tool manufacturing in separate zones. This pattern indicates that different groups focused on specific crafts. Such specialization is a hallmark of complex economies because it requires reliable food production capable of supporting non-farming populations. Comparisons with contemporary settlements make Sarazm even more unusual. Many villages of the 4th millennium BCE consisted primarily of agricultural households, producing most necessities locally. Sarazm, by contrast, exhibits evidence of artisans dedicated to metallurgy, bead-making, ceramics, and long-distance exchange. The economic structure resembles an emerging urban centre rather than an isolated village. Then, after nearly 15 centuries of prosperity, Sarasm declined. Around 2000 BCE, occupation decreased dramatically. No signs of catastrophic warfare have been discovered. No evidence points to a single destructive event. Instead, the settlement appears to have faded gradually. Climate change, shifting river systems, resource depletion, and the reorganization of trade routes have all been proposed as explanations. None fully account for the disappearance of such an influential center. Moklos is a small island and coastal settlement on the northeastern shore of Crete, Greece. At first glance, it appears insignificant compared to the monumental palaces of Knossos or Phaistos. Yet beneath its modest ruins lies one of the greatest technological mysteries of the Bronze Age. More than 4,000 years ago, this tiny community became a center of wealth, craftsmanship, and international trade that rivaled some of the most powerful societies of the Eastern Mediterranean. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of gold workshops, stone drilling technologies, imported ivory, and luxury goods arriving from lands hundreds of kilometers away. The mystery is not that Moklos existed. The mystery is how such a small settlement achieved a level of industrial sophistication that still challenges modern attempts at reconstruction. The story began in the early 20th century when American archaeologist Richard Seeger identified rich Minoan remains on the island. Later excavations revealed houses, workshops, tombs, administrative buildings, and vast quantities of luxury objects dating primarily between 3000 and 1450 BCE. What initially appeared to be a minor coastal settlement gradually emerged as one of the most important manufacturing centers of Minoan Crete. Every new excavation raised the same question. Why was so much advanced technology concentrated in such a small place? The most striking mystery surrounds the workshops themselves. Excavations uncovered evidence for the production of jewelry, stone vessels, seals, ivory carvings, and precious metal objects. Some artifacts are so finely crafted that they appear almost impossible for a civilization lacking iron tools. Bronze Age craftsmen worked primarily with copper alloys, stone abrasives, and organic materials. Yet many objects from Moklos display levels of precision comparable to artifacts produced thousands of years later. Among the most remarkable discoveries are beads and ornaments made from hard stones such as carnelian, crystal, and amethyst. These materials rank between 6.5 and 7 on the Mohs hardness scale. Copper, by comparison, has a hardness of only about 3. Archaeologists generally agree that craftsmen used abrasive drilling techniques involving quartz, sand, emery, or corundum. However, the quality of some drilled holes remains difficult to explain. Many perforations are perfectly centered and maintain nearly identical diameters throughout their entire depth. Experimental archaeologists have reproduced similar techniques using bow drills, but the process often requires enormous labor and extraordinary skill. The question remains whether the artisans of Moklos possess specialized drilling methods that have not survived in the archaeological record. The mystery becomes even deeper when examining Minoan goldwork. Tiny gold beads, delicate chains, and intricate decorative elements have been discovered throughout Moklos. Some components measure only a few millimeters across. Modern jewelers can reproduce such work using magnification, precision tools, and controlled workshop environments. Bronze Age craftsmen had none of these advantages. Yet microscopic examination reveals astonishing consistency. The craftsmen were not merely creating jewelry, they were operating what appears to have been a highly organized manufacturing industry. How this expertise was transmitted, standardized, and maintained remains poorly understood. The evidence suggests that Moklos functioned as far more than a village. It may have been one of the technological hubs of the Minoan world. Comparisons with larger centres such as Knossos reveal surprising similarities in craftsmanship, despite enormous differences in size. In modern terms, Moklos resembles a specialised industrial district rather than a conventional town. The concentration of skilled labour is unusually high for a settlement of its scale. This raises another unresolved question. Where were these craftsmen trained? No known educational system from Bronze Age Crete fully explains the emergence of such technical expertise. Equally mysterious is the source of the raw materials entering the settlement. Crete possesses some natural resources, but many luxury materials found at Moklos originated far beyond the island. Archaeologists have identified ivory likely imported from Egypt, precious stones from distant regions of the Near East, and metals arriving through extensive trade networks. Some materials travelled hundreds or even thousands of kilometres before reaching the workshops of Moklos. The logistical implications are extraordinary. During the 3rd and 2nd millennia BCE, there were no magnetic compasses, no accurate nautical charts, and no modern navigation instruments. Yet Minoan merchants maintained trade connections across the eastern Mediterranean. The distance between Crete and the Nile Delta exceeds 600 kilometers by sea. Routes to the Levant and Anatolia were similarly demanding. Nevertheless, imported goods reached Moklos with remarkable regularity. This suggests a maritime knowledge system far more sophisticated than traditionally imagined. The mystery of Minoan navigation remains one of the most debated topics in Bronze Age archaeology. Ancient sailors likely relied on celestial observations, prevailing winds, seasonal currents, and accumulated experience. Yet these explanations only partially account for the scale of Minoan trade. The Mediterranean's unpredictable. Storms can develop rapidly, coastlines are complex, and visibility is often limited. Somehow, merchants repeatedly crossed these waters while transporting valuable cargo. Some scholars argue that the Minoans possessed generations of accumulated maritime knowledge that functioned as an advanced navigational science, even if it was never written down. The settlement's architecture presents another technological puzzle. Crete lies within one of the most seismically active regions of the Mediterranean. The island sits near the boundary between the African and Eurasian tectonic plates. Large earthquakes have repeatedly struck the region throughout history, yet many Minoan structures survived for centuries before their eventual destruction. At Moklos, builders employed sophisticated masonry techniques involving carefully fitted stone blocks and layered construction methods. Some architectural features appear designed to distribute stress and absorb movement. Similar engineering principles have been identified at Knossos and other Minoan sites. Modern earthquake-resistant buildings often rely on flexible structures capable of dissipating energy rather than resisting it directly. Whether Minoan builders consciously understood these principles remains unknown. However, the durability of their architecture suggests a practical mastery gained through centuries of experience. The cemetery of Moklos introduces yet another mystery. Tombs dating to the early Minoan period contained astonishing quantities of wealth. Gold ornaments, imported materials, stone vessels, and prestige goods appear in concentrations rarely matched elsewhere on Crete. The scale of this wealth suggests that Moklos occupied a strategic economic position within international trade networks. Yet archaeologists continue to debate the source of this prosperity. Was Moklos a manufacturing centre exporting luxury goods? Was it a redistribution hub controlling maritime commerce? Or was it connected to political powers whose influences vanish from history? No single explanation fully accounts for the extraordinary accumulation of wealth discovered within its cemeteries. One of the greatest mysteries is Moklos' decline. In the mid-2nd millennium BCE, earthquakes, political changes, shifting trade networks, and the eruption of Thera on Santorini disrupted the Minoan world. Over time, Moklos lost its importance. Workshops closed, trade declined, and many buildings were abandoned. Along with the settlement, generations of technological knowledge may also have disappeared. Barely standing above the collapsing cliffs of East Sussex, England, Hastings Castle looks less like a surviving fortress and more like the remains of something that should have vanished centuries ago. Built immediately after the Norman invasion of 1066 by William the Conqueror, the castle has endured almost 1,000 years of storms, salt corrosion, ground movement, war damage, and coastal collapse. Entire sections of the cliff beneath it have fallen into the English Channel, yet major portions of the structure still remain attached to the unstable rock above the sea. That alone should not be possible. The site was first identified in written records shortly after the Battle of Hastings, when Norman forces rapidly established military control over southern England. Archaeological excavations carried out throughout the 19th and 20th centuries reveal that Hastings Castle was not a temporary wooden fortification, as many historians originally believed. Beneath the visible ruins, researchers uncovered evidence of an unusually advanced stone foundation system combined with imported Caen limestone from Normandy, layered rubble cores and mortar compositions that behaved differently from standard medieval mixtures. What makes Hastings Castle extraordinary is not simply its age. It is the possibility that Norman engineers were using construction principles far more sophisticated than previously assumed. The first mystery begins with the cliff itself. Modern geological studies show that the Hastings coastline is composed largely of soft sandstone, clay, and unstable sedimentary layers highly vulnerable to erosion. Coastal retreat in some nearby sections has measured several meters per century. In simple terms, the ground under the castle has been slowly moving toward the sea for nearly a millennium. Yet instead of building deep, rigid foundations like many Roman structures, Norman builders appear to have used a semi-flexible load distribution method. Excavations revealed compacted rubble beds beneath sections of the surviving walls, almost functioning like primitive shock absorbers. Rather than resisting every shift in the ground, the structure may have been designed to tolerate gradual movement. That concept resembles modern earthquake engineering more than traditional medieval construction. Engineers studying ancient seismic-resistant structures often compare this idea to the flexible stone layering seen at sites like Machu Picchu or certain Byzantine fortifications, where slight movement prevents catastrophic cracking. Hastings Castle was not built in an earthquake zone, but the same principle may have unintentionally protected it from cliff instability for centuries. The second mystery involves the mortar. Salt water is one of the most destructive forces against stone architecture. Salt crystals penetrate microscopic pores, expand over time, and eventually fracture entire surfaces from within. Most medieval coastal fortifications suffer severe deterioration after only a few centuries of exposure. But portions of Hastings Castle's Norman walls still survive despite nearly constant exposure to sea winds and moisture. Material analysis has shown that some mortar samples contain traces of volcanic ash-like particles, unusually fine aggregates, and mineral reactions associated with weak pozzolanic chemistry. Pozzolanic reactions occur when lime interacts with silicates and moisture, creating compounds capable of strengthening over time. This is the same general principle that made Roman concrete so durable that many Roman harbours still exist after 2,000 years underwater. The comparison is impossible to ignore. Roman marine concrete contained volcanic ash from Pozzuoli in Italy, allowing chemical crystallization that strengthened structures continuously in seawater. Hastings Castle did not use true Roman concrete, but some researchers believe Norman masons may have unknowingly recreated fragments of the same chemistry using local materials and recycled Roman debris from Britain. If correct, the castle may preserve one of medieval Europe's closest accidental approximations of ancient Roman long-life mortar technology. The third mystery lies underground. Beneath the surviving ruins are partially collapsed tunnels, storage chambers, and carved passageways whose full purpose remains uncertain. Some were likely used for food storage or military supplies, but several sections are unusually narrow and positioned in ways that make little defensive sense. More puzzling is their ventilation. Despite being carved into damp coastal rock, parts of these underground spaces maintain surprisingly stable airflow. Researchers suspect the tunnels may have used passive pressure differences between openings at different elevations, creating natural air circulation without mechanical systems. This resembles ventilation principles found in far older underground complexes, such as Derinkuyu Underground City, where entire subterranean cities maintain breathable conditions using vertical airflow shafts. Hastings Castle was nowhere near that scale, yet the engineering logic appears strangely similar. If Norman builders intentionally controlled underground airflow, it would suggest a far deeper understanding of humidity management and food preservation than historians usually attribute to 11th century England. The fourth mystery concerns military communication. The castle occupies one of the most strategically visible points on the Sussex coastline. From its elevated position, observers could monitor shipping routes across large sections of the English Channel. Some historians believe Hastings Castle formed part of an early warning network stretching along southern England. This theory becomes more intriguing when examining line-of-sight calculations between coastal high points. Experimental reconstructions suggest beacon fires placed at Hastings could potentially be seen from multiple defensive positions under favourable conditions. In practice, this would allow rapid long-distance signalling using fire or reflected light, essentially a medieval optical communication system. The Byzantine Empire used beacon chains capable of transmitting messages across hundreds of kilometers in a single night. Ancient China also operated smoke signal defense networks along frontier walls. Hastings Castle may represent a Norman adaptation of the same strategic concept shortly after the conquest of England. If true, the Normans established not merely a fortress, but part of a coordinated surveillance infrastructure remarkably advanced for its time. Then there is the chapel. Among the ruins stands the remains of a stone chapel with acoustic behaviour that still confuses visitors today. Tests conducted in partially preserved sections show that certain positions amplify speech naturally through reflected sound waves. Even quiet voices can travel clearly within the chamber. This effect appears in some Romanesque churches, yet Hastings Castle's chapel is unusually compact for such strong resonance. Acoustic engineers note that curved masonry, thick walls, and narrow interior proportions can focus reflected sound in highly specific ways. Whether intentional or accidental, the result would have dramatically enhanced religious ceremonies, making voices seem deeper and more powerful inside the enclosed stone environment. Ancient civilizations repeatedly exploited similar acoustic phenomena. At Chichen Itza, echoes near the pyramid staircase mimic bird calls. In Greek theatres, stone geometry projected voices across enormous audiences. Hastings Castle may preserve a smaller but equally fascinating example of medieval acoustic engineering intuition. Another mystery involves temperature regulation. Although the castle sits on exposed coastal cliffs battered by cold sea winds, excavations suggest some chambers maintained relatively stable internal temperatures year-round. Thick stone walls combined with partially subterranean layouts likely created a primitive thermal buffer system. This passive temperature stabilization resembles concepts used in Persian yakhchals, Roman hippocaust-adjacent storage systems, and underground monastic chambers across Europe. The principle is simple but effective. Stone absorbs heat slowly and releases it gradually, reducing temperature extremes. For soldiers storing food, weapons, and supplies near the coast, such stability would have been critically important. Do you think Hastings Castle survived because of forgotten engineering knowledge? Or was its survival simply an accident of history? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tsagaan-agi, hidden within the limestone mountains of the Gobi Altai region of southern Mongolia, does not resemble the pyramids of Egypt, the temples of Mesopotamia, or the stone circles of Europe. There are no towering monuments, no carved inscriptions, and no massive walls. Yet this cave contains one of the most important records of human technological evolution ever discovered in Central Asia. Archaeological evidence suggests that humans repeatedly occupied the cave between approximately 70,000 and 40,000 years ago, during one of the most critical periods in human history, the transition from archaic populations to fully modern humans. What makes Tsagaan-agi extraordinary is not its size, but the technological sophistication hidden within thousands of stone tools found beneath its floor. These artifacts reveal engineering principles, manufacturing techniques, and knowledge transmission systems that remain only partially understood today. Located in the Gobi Altai Mountains of southwestern Mongolia, Tsagaan-agi, meaning White Cave, was first documented by researchers during Soviet Mongolian archaeological investigations in the 20th century. Systematic excavations later revealed deep cultural layers containing stone tools, animal remains, charcoal, and evidence of repeated human occupation. Radiometric dating and stratigraphic analysis demonstrated that the cave preserved one of the longest Paleolithic sequences in Mongolia, spanning tens of thousands of years. What initially appeared to be a simple prehistoric shelter soon emerged as a rare technological archive from an era when humanity was developing some of its most advanced Stone Age innovations. Among the most significant discoveries at Tsagaan-agi are tools produced using the level-way technique. To modern observers, these stone flakes may seem primitive. In reality, levallois technology represents one of the earliest known examples of advanced manufacturing planning. Unlike simple stone knapping, levallois production required craftsmen to shape a stone core through multiple preparatory stages before striking off a final flake with a predetermined shape. Researchers often compare the process to manufacturing a component from a mold. The desired product existed first in the maker's mind long before the final strike occurred. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated that mastering levallois technology requires extensive training, and a single mistake can destroy hours of preparation. What remains unclear is how such sophisticated knowledge developed. The cave contains evidence that these techniques were practiced repeatedly over thousands of years, suggesting the existence of highly effective systems of education and skill transmission. Yet no written language existed, no diagrams existed, and no manuals survived. How could technological knowledge requiring such precision be passed accurately from generation to generation for tens of thousands of years? The question remains unanswered. One of the most surprising discoveries at Tsagaan-agi is the consistency of many stone tools. When archaeologists measure flakes produced from levallois cores, they often find recurring patterns in shape, thickness, and dimensions. Such standardization is not accidental. In modern manufacturing, consistency usually results from measurement systems, templates, or quality control procedures. The people of Tsagaan-agi possessed none of these, yet many artifacts display a level of repeatability that suggests craftsmen were following highly structured production methods. This creates a fascinating mystery. How did prehistoric toolmakers maintain manufacturing standards without rulers, written instructions, or numerical systems? Some researchers suggest that apprentices learned through years of direct observation, while others argue that cognitive abilities among these populations may have been far more sophisticated than traditionally assumed. Whatever the explanation, the results reveal a surprisingly advanced form of technological discipline. Another puzzle concerns the spread of technology itself. The Levallois technique found at Sargana-Gui did not emerge in isolation. Similar technologies appeared across Africa, the Middle East, Europe, and parts of Asia. This raises an important question. How did technological knowledge travel across such enormous distances during the Paleolithic? Modern communication networks did not exist. Road systems did not exist. Written records did not exist. Yet comparable manufacturing methods appeared across regions separated by thousands of kilometers. Researchers have proposed several possibilities. Perhaps populations migrated and carried knowledge with them. Perhaps neighboring groups exchanged ideas through repeated contact. Or perhaps similar solutions emerged independently in different locations. Each explanation presents difficulties. The archaeological evidence remains incomplete, leaving one of prehistory's greatest mysteries unresolved. How information moved through the ancient world long before civilization itself existed. Geological analysis has revealed that not all raw materials found inside Sargana-Gui originated near the cave. Some stone appears to have been transported significant distances. This may not sound remarkable today. For Paleolithic hunter-gatherers, however, it is extraordinary. Transporting stone over dozens or even hundreds of kilometers requires planning, knowledge of resource locations, and organized movement across large territories. The phenomenon resembles patterns seen at Stonehenge, where certain blue stones were transported over distances exceeding 200 kilometers. The scale is much smaller at Sargana-Gui, but the principle is similar. People deliberately acquired materials that were not locally available. Why? Did distant stones possess superior mechanical properties? Were they traded between groups? Did they carry symbolic significance? Archaeologists still debate the answer. The Gobi region is among the most extreme environments inhabited by humans. Temperatures can vary dramatically between seasons. Water sources are limited, and food availability fluctuates constantly. Yet evidence suggests that humans repeatedly return to Sargana-Gui over tens of thousands of years. This implies the existence of survival technologies that remain largely invisible in the archaeological record. Stone tools survive, knowledge does not. Researchers can reconstruct hunting strategies, but many details remain uncertain. How are seasonal migrations planned? How are resources stored? How is information about water sources transmitted? How did groups coordinate movement across vast landscapes without maps? These challenges are difficult enough for modern survival experts. For Paleolithic populations, they required remarkable environmental knowledge. The cave preserves evidence of success, but reveals little about the systems that made that success possible. Perhaps the most profound mystery concerns human intelligence itself. Creating a Levallois tool requires several advanced mental abilities, including long-term planning, spatial visualization, understanding cause and effect, sequential problem-solving, and prediction of future outcomes. These are characteristics often associated with modern engineering. Some researchers argue that the artifacts from Sargana-Gui provide evidence that human cognitive abilities had already reached surprisingly advanced level by this period. The implication is significant. For decades, prehistoric humans were often portrayed as intellectually primitive. The evidence from Sargana-Gui suggests something very different. The makers of these tools were capable of abstract thought, complex learning, and technological innovation. The cave may represent not merely a shelter, but a record of the emergence of modern human cognition. One reason Sagana Gui is so important is its position within a broader technological transition. The archaeological layers document changes in tool production over time. Older industries gradually gave way to newer forms of technology. This transition mirrors similar developments observed across Eurasia during the late Pleistocene, but researchers still debate how these transformations occurred. Did new populations arrive carrying different technologies? Did local populations innovate independently? Or did ideas spread through long-distance cultural exchange? The answer remains uncertain. Comparable debates surround famous sites such as Denisova Cave and Blombos Cave, where evidence of technological and behavioral change continues to challenge traditional models of human evolution. Sagana Gui contributes another crucial piece to this puzzle, yet many pieces are still missing. More than 3,500 meters above sea level in the Peruvian Andes, hidden among clouds, cliffs and razor-sharp mountain ridges, Rupak appears like the remains of a civilization that should never have existed there. Archaeologists first reached the site through steep mountain trails used for centuries by local shepherds, but what they found made little sense. Massive stone structures stood balanced on unstable slopes in one of the most earthquake-prone regions on Earth. Even stranger, many of the walls appeared older than the Inca Empire itself. The site is believed to have been built by the mysterious Atavillos culture, sometime between the 10th and 15th centuries, yet the engineering techniques found there resemble technologies that should not have existed in such an isolated mountain civilization. The first mystery surrounding Rupak is its earthquake-resistant construction. Peru lies directly along the Pacific Ring of Fire, where the Nazca Plate collides beneath the South American Plate at roughly 7 to 9 centimeters per year. This tectonic collision produces some of the strongest earthquakes on the planet. Modern engineers spend billions designing anti-seismic structures in the Andes, yet many walls at Rupak have survived centuries of tremors without steel reinforcement, concrete, or modern foundations. The stone blocks were cut and fitted together with astonishing precision. In some areas, the gaps between stones are so small that even a knife blade cannot fit between them. Similar techniques are famous at Machu Picchu and Sacsayhuaman, but Rupak remains more mysterious because the Atavillos civilization left behind almost no written records explaining how these methods were developed. What fascinates archaeologists most is the geometry of the walls. Many structures lean slightly inward, creating trapezoidal forms that distribute seismic energy more effectively. Modern earthquake engineering uses similar principles in flexible high-rise buildings. During earthquakes, rigid walls crack under stress, but angled structures absorb vibrations and redirect force downward. Studies on Inca masonry have shown that irregular polygonal stones can shift slightly during tremors and then settle back into place without collapsing. Rupak appears to use the same concept, but on steep mountain terrain where construction should have been even more difficult. The next mystery is transportation. Rupak was built in an environment where moving stone should have been nearly impossible. The slopes around the site are narrow, dangerous, and often covered in fog. Some stone blocks weigh several tons, yet the civilization that built Rupak had no known wheeled transport system and no draft animals powerful enough to haul heavy loads uphill. Llamas could carry only about 25 to 30 kilograms each, far too little for megalithic construction. Even today, transporting construction materials to similar elevations requires helicopters or heavy machinery. Researchers believe the Atavillos may have used massive teams of workers with rope systems made from woven plant fibers, but no complete reconstruction has successfully demonstrated how such large stones could have been maneuvered safely across the mountain cliffs. The mystery becomes even deeper when scientists examine the climate engineering of Rupak. Temperatures in the high Andes fluctuate dramatically. Daytime temperatures can become intensely hot under direct sunlight, while nighttime temperatures often drop close to freezing. Yet many rooms inside Rupak appear designed to stabilize internal temperatures naturally. Thick stone walls absorb heat during the day and slowly release it at night, a process known today as thermal mass regulation. Small ventilation openings create controlled airflow that reduces heat buildup while preserving warmth after sunset. Similar environmental engineering appears in Persian yakchals, Roman hypocaust systems, and Middle Eastern wind towers. But seeing comparable thermal concepts developed independently in isolated Andean mountains raises major questions about the sophistication of pre-Columbian engineering knowledge. One of the strangest structures at Rupak is the group of towering funerary buildings known as chulpas. Some rise nearly 3 stories high and sit dangerously close to cliff edges. Building vertically on unstable mountain terrain without mortar should have been extremely risky. Yet many of these towers remain standing after centuries of earthquakes, rain, and erosion. Geological surveys suggest the builders may have intentionally anchored structures directly onto exposed bedrock rather than softer soil layers. This indicates a practical understanding of slope stability and weight distribution long before modern geotechnical engineering existed. In many ways, Rupak resembles an ancient laboratory where survival and engineering became inseparable. Another unexplained feature is the water system. Rupak sits in a region where maintaining a large population would have required advanced water management. Archaeologists discovered channels, reservoirs, and collection systems designed to trap rainwater and mountain moisture. Some researchers believe the Atavilos may have harvested condensation and fog in a way similar to modern fog-catching technology used today in parts of Chile and Peru. Modern fog collectors can produce several liters of water per square meter each day under the right conditions. If ancient engineers understood even a primitive version of this principle, it would explain how a large mountaintop settlement survived in an environment with limited freshwater access. The site also contains evidence suggesting astronomical alignment. Certain doorways and wall openings appear positioned towards specific solar events, including solstices and seasonal sunrises. Ancient civilizations across the world often aligned structures with celestial cycles. Chaco Canyon in North America, Nabta Playa in Egypt, and Stonehenge in Britain all demonstrate sophisticated astronomical awareness thousands of years ago. Rupak may represent another example of a civilization integrating astronomy into architecture, religion, and political authority. Some researchers believe the mountaintop location itself was symbolic, placing the settlement physically closer to the sky and the gods worshipped by the Atavilos people. Yet perhaps the greatest mystery is the civilization behind the city. Unlike the Inca, the Atavilos remain poorly understood. Spanish chroniclers mention them only briefly, and much of their culture disappeared following conquest and disease after European arrival in the 16th century. Because of this, Rupak exists almost without historical context. Archaeologists are forced to reconstruct the story entirely from stone, landscape, and fragments of pottery. Burn marks found on parts of the site suggest conflict or ritual destruction before abandonment, but nobody knows whether Rupak fell to warfare, environmental collapse, political instability, or deliberate evacuation. The isolation of Rupak may also explain why the site remained relatively unknown for so long. Thick mountain fog often covers the ruins, making them nearly invisible from below. The city appears almost designed to disappear into the Andes themselves. Unlike Machu Picchu, which became globally famous after Hiram Bingham's 1911 expedition, Rupac remains one of Peru's least studied archaeological sites despite containing engineering techniques that rival far more famous ancient cities. Comparisons with other ancient mountain civilizations only deepen the mystery. The Inca mastered stone fitting on a massive imperial scale, Petra-engineered hydraulic systems in desert cliffs. Tibetan monasteries survived harsh Himalayan winters using passive heating techniques. But Rupac combines all of these elements simultaneously: seismic engineering, vertical mountain construction, thermal regulation, water harvesting, and astronomical orientation inside a relatively isolated settlement built by a civilization that history barely remembers. Modern structural engineers who study ancient Andean architecture often admit that some of these techniques remain difficult to replicate even today without advanced surveying tools. Precision stone fitting on uneven mountain terrain requires an extraordinary understanding of geometry, weight transfer, and material behavior. Some walls at Rupac appear so precisely balanced that removing a single stone could destabilize entire sections, suggesting the builders understood structural interdependence at a highly advanced level. What do you think the builders of Rupac really understood about engineering and survival in the Andes? Was this knowledge centuries ahead of its time, or are we still missing a major piece of the story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In 1926, during Benito Mussolini's massive urban redevelopment projects, workers demolishing old buildings in the heart of Rome unexpectedly uncovered something hidden beneath the modern city. As excavation continued, archaeologists revealed 4 ancient Republican temples, sections of paved streets, monumental foundations, and parts of the massive Theatre of Pompey complex. The site became known as Lago di Torre Argentina. At first glance, the ruins appeared to be another collection of Roman remains. But decades of excavation would reveal something far more intriguing. Beneath the crowded streets of modern Rome lay evidence of engineering capabilities that continue to challenge archaeologists and structural experts today. The temples date from approximately the 4th to the 2nd centuries BCE, meaning some structures have survived for more than 2,200 years. Yet many of the technologies that made such survival possible remain only partially understood. One of the greatest engineering puzzles begins with the location itself. Lago di Torre Argentina sits within the ancient floodplain of the Tiber River. Modern engineers recognize floodplains as some of the most difficult environments for large-scale construction. Soft sediments, seasonal flooding, groundwater fluctuations, and long-term soil movement create serious structural risks. Even today, projects built on similar terrain often require deep foundation systems, reinforced concrete piles, soil stabilization techniques, and continuous monitoring. Yet Roman builders erected monumental stone temples weighing thousands of tons on this challenging landscape over 2 millennia ago. Archaeological investigations reveal massive foundation platforms extending deep below the visible ruins. These foundations distributed enormous loads across unstable ground with remarkable effectiveness. The mystery is not simply that the structures were built. The mystery is how Roman engineers determined where and how deep to build without geological surveys, drilling equipment, computer modeling, or modern soil analysis. The survival of these foundations through centuries of floods, earthquakes, urban development, and environmental change suggests a level of practical geotechnical knowledge that remains difficult to fully reconstruct. For comparison, many medieval structures built more than 1,000 years later suffered severe settlement problems. Yet portions of the foundations at Lago di Torre Argentina remain remarkably stable. Beneath the temples lies one of the most famous yet least understood technologies of the ancient world, Roman concrete. Known as opus caementitium, this material formed the backbone of Roman engineering. Samples recovered from structures throughout Rome demonstrate extraordinary durability. Modern concrete often begins showing significant deterioration after 50 to 100 years, particularly when exposed to moisture and environmental stress. The concrete used in Largo di Torre, Argentina, has survived more than 2,000 years. Scientific analysis has identified several key ingredients: volcanic ash known as pozzolana, lime, stone aggregates, and water. Yet knowing the ingredients is not the same as understanding the technology. Recent materials science research has shown that some Roman concrete contains microscopic lime clasts, capable of promoting self-healing reactions when cracks develop. These reactions can generate new mineral growth that helps seal damage. The question is whether Roman builders intentionally engineered these properties or accidentally discovered them through centuries of experimentation. No surviving technical manuals explain the process. No engineering documents reveal quality control procedures. No written instructions describe how mixtures were optimized for different construction environments. The concrete remains, but the knowledge behind it largely disappeared. Water was both Rome's greatest resource and one of its greatest threats. The Tiber River provided transportation, trade routes, and fresh water, but it also flooded frequently. Historical records indicate numerous major floods throughout Roman history. Some inundated large sections of the city. Yet the temples of Largo di Torre, Argentina remained functional for centuries. Excavations have revealed evidence of sophisticated drainage systems beneath the site, including channels, stone-lined conduits, elevated platforms, and engineered surfaces designed to redirect water flow. However, only fragments survive. Much of the original hydraulic network has either been destroyed, buried beneath later construction, or remains inaccessible beneath modern Rome. This creates a fascinating problem. Archaeologists can see the results, but they cannot see the entire system. Computer reconstructions suggest that Roman engineers may have integrated the temple complex into a broader urban drainage network connected to roads, sewers, and nearby public infrastructure. If true, the site represents part of a citywide hydraulic machine operating at a scale comparable to some modern municipal systems. Yet significant portions remain hidden beneath the modern city, leaving many questions unanswered. The temples discovered at Largo di Torre, Argentina were not constructed at the same time. Some were separated by centuries. Different governments, different architects, different political periods, and different construction teams contributed to the complex. Despite this, modern laser surveys reveal impressive geometric consistency. Walls align with extraordinary precision. Foundation platforms maintain carefully controlled orientations. Structural elements exhibit accuracy that often differs by only centimeters across distances of dozens of meters. Today, such precision is routinely achieved using GPS systems, laser scanners, electronic total stations, and computer-assisted design software. Roman engineers possessed none of these technologies. Their primary surveying instrument was the groma, a relatively simple device consisting of crossed arms and hanging plumb lines. The question is not whether the groma worked. The question is how such apparently simple tools achieved results that continue to impress modern surveyors. Some researchers argue that Roman surveying techniques have been underestimated. Others suggest that generations of accumulated practical experience created levels of accuracy that written sources fail to capture. Whatever the explanation, the precision remains remarkable. Every visible ruin at Largo di Torre, Argentina represents a transportation challenge. Columns weighing multiple tons had to be quarried, transported, positioned, and aligned. Stone blocks were moved through crowded urban environments without trucks, cranes, hydraulic lifts, or powered machinery. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated that Roman lifting devices were capable of extraordinary performance. Reconstructions of Roman treadwheel cranes indicate lifting capacities ranging from several tons to more than 6 tons under ideal conditions. Yet many questions remain. How are operations coordinated? How many workers participated? How are loads stabilized? How are precision placements achieved without modern measuring equipment? The problem becomes even more impressive when considering the scale of Roman construction elsewhere. The same civilization that built the temples of Largo di Torre, Argentina, also constructed the Pantheon, aqueducts spanning dozens of kilometers, and amphitheaters capable of holding tens of thousands of spectators. The technologies clearly worked, but the details of their operation remain incomplete. Adjacent to the temple complex once stood one of the greatest structures in Republican Rome, the Theatre of Pompey. Completed around 55 BCE, it was the first permanent stone theatre ever built in Rome. Ancient sources estimate a capacity between 15,000 and 20,000 spectators. Today, only fragments survive beneath modern buildings. This creates an extraordinary archaeological mystery. Ancient writers describe the theatre. Excavations reveal portions of its foundations. Modern technology can map buried remains. Yet no complete architectural plans survive. No engineering reports exist. No construction manuals explain how the project was organized. The building represented one of the largest construction undertakings of its era. Yet much of the technical knowledge required to create it vanished with the Roman world. Ironically, modern researchers often understand the final structure better than the engineering process that produced it. Standing beside the ancient Aurelian walls is one of the strangest monuments in the entire Roman world. It is not a temple, it is not an amphitheatre, and it is not a triumphal arch. It is a pyramid. Known as the Pyramid of Cestius, the structure rises approximately 36.4 meters, 119 feet high, with a base measuring about 29.5 meters, 97 feet on each side. Built around 1812 BC as the tomb of the Roman magistrate Gaius Cestius, it remains one of the best preserved monuments from ancient Rome. Its existence alone raises questions. Why would Romans, famous for arches, domes, roads, and aqueducts, suddenly construct an Egyptian-style pyramid in the heart of Italy? Yet the deeper archaeologists investigate, the more extraordinary mysteries emerge, not merely about its purpose, but about the engineering knowledge required to build it. An inscription on the monument reveals a remarkable detail. The pyramid was completed in just 330 days. At first glance, this may not sound extraordinary, but consider what the project involved. Workers had to prepare foundations, construct a massive concrete core, produce enormous quantities of brickwork, transport marble from distant quarries, shape the exterior, decorate the burial chamber, and complete all finishing work within less than a year. Modern engineering studies estimate that the structure contains thousands of tons of construction material. For comparison, many modern public buildings of similar size often require significantly longer construction schedules, despite cranes, trucks, power tools, and computer planning systems. Ancient Roman builders possessed none of these advantages. How they organized labor, coordinated material deliveries, and maintained such speed remains poorly understood. Some historians estimate that hundreds of workers may have operated simultaneously. Others suggest that the Roman Empire's logistical systems were so efficient that materials could move through supply networks with a speed rarely associated with ancient civilizations. Whatever the explanation, the construction schedule remains one of the most astonishing aspects of the monument. The Pyramid of Cestius appears Egyptian on the outside. Inside, however, it is entirely Roman. Unlike the Great Pyramid of Giza, which consists of millions of limestone blocks, the Pyramid of Cestius relies primarily on a concrete core covered with brick and marble. This concrete, known as opus caementicium, continues to fascinate scientists today. Modern laboratory studies have revealed that Roman concrete often contains volcanic ash, lime, and mineral compounds capable of producing self-healing reactions when cracks develop. Researchers studying Roman harbour structures have discovered examples that remained durable for nearly 2,000 years despite constant exposure to seawater. The Pyramid of Cestius demonstrates a similar level of durability. For over 2,000 years it has survived earthquakes, storms, pollution, urban expansion, military conflicts, and environmental degradation. Many modern concrete structures begin showing major deterioration after only 50 to 100 years. The Pyramid of Cestius continues standing after 20 centuries. Scientists can identify many of the ingredients used by Roman builders. What remains unclear is whether the Romans fully understood the long-term chemical reactions occurring inside their concrete, or whether they achieved these results through generations of practical experimentation. Either possibility suggests a level of material science far more sophisticated than commonly assumed. The pyramid's steep sides rise at angles far sharper than most Egyptian pyramids. Maintaining symmetry over a height exceeding 36 meters required extraordinary precision. Today, engineers use laser levels, GPS systems, digital surveying equipment, and computer modeling. Roman builders relied on ropes, plumb bobs, measuring rods, and geometry. Yet modern surveys reveal remarkably accurate alignment and symmetry. This raises a fundamental question. How much mathematical knowledge did Roman surveyors possess? Roman engineers are known to have mastered land surveying techniques. They designed roads crossing entire continents, aqueducts maintaining gradients of only a few centimeters per kilometer, and military camps with highly standardized layouts. The Pyramid of Cestius may represent another example of lost practical knowledge. The structure suggests a sophisticated understanding of geometry and construction control, yet very little technical documentation survives explaining exactly how such precision was achieved. One of the most overlooked mysteries involves the monument's white marble exterior. The entire structure was originally covered with fine Carrara marble. This stone originated hundreds of kilometers away in northern Italy. Extracting the marble required quarrying operations. Transporting it required roads, rivers, ships, carts, workers, animals, and administrative coordination. Every block had to arrive at the correct location and at the correct stage of construction. The logistics become even more impressive when viewed within the 330-day construction deadline. For comparison, the construction of Egyptian pyramids required enormous transportation systems. The builders of the Parthenon in Athens faced similar challenges. The Roman Empire appears to have developed an equally sophisticated supply network. Yet historians still debate the true scale of Roman construction logistics because the documentation is fragmentary. The Pyramid of Cestius may represent only a tiny surviving example of a system far larger than archaeologists can currently reconstruct. Within the monument lies a small burial chamber measuring approximately 5.95 meters long, 4.10 meters wide, and 4.80 meters high. The chamber contains delicate frescoes painted on white backgrounds. Its size presents an interesting contradiction. An enormous pyramid surrounds a relatively modest burial room. This raises questions about symbolism. Was the pyramid intended primarily as a tomb? Or was it also a public statement of wealth, power, political status, and cultural influence? Many details of the original interior remain unknown because grave robbers likely entered the structure centuries ago. Artifacts that might have explained the owner's intentions are largely missing. The surviving chamber therefore preserves only fragments of the monument's original story. Perhaps the greatest historical mystery concerns the design itself. The pyramid was built shortly after Rome's conquest of Egypt in 30 BC. Egyptian culture suddenly became fashionable among Roman elites. Obelisks appeared throughout Rome. Egyptian religious practices gained followers. Artistic styles spread across the empire. Yet the Pyramid of Cestius remains unique. Romans constructed countless tombs, but almost none adopted such an extreme Egyptian form. Why did Gaius Cestius choose a pyramid instead of a traditional Roman mausoleum? Some scholars suggest it reflected admiration for Egypt. Others believe it symbolized prestige and international influence. Still others argue that the shape carried religious meanings now lost to history. The absence of written explanations means the true motivation remains uncertain. The monument's continued survival presents another puzzle. Over 2,000 years, Rome experienced invasions, civil wars, earthquakes, economic collapse, medieval rebuilding, and modern urban development. Many ancient structures vanished completely. The Pyramid of Cestius endured. Its survival was partly accidental. During the construction of the Aurelian walls in the 3rd century AD, the pyramid was incorporated into Rome's defensive system. This decision protected the structure from destruction. Yet preservation alone does not explain its durability. The monument still depends on engineering decisions made more than 20 centuries ago. The foundations continue supporting immense weight. The concrete remains stable. The geometry remains intact. Every surviving feature points toward a level of practical engineering expertise that historians can observe but not fully reconstruct. Sri Lanka's central highlands, near the ancient city of Matale, hide Nalanda Gedige, a stone temple so architecturally strange that historians still cannot fully explain who built it, how its materials survived tropical destruction for over 1,000 years, or why its engineering resembles structures scattered across India, Byzantium, and even the Andes. Nalanda Gedige was rediscovered during British archaeological surveys in the 19th century, but its greatest mystery emerged decades later when engineers realized the structure was not built like traditional Sri Lankan Buddhist temples. After the nearby Boatena Reservoir project threatened the site in the 1970s, the entire monument was dismantled stone by stone and relocated roughly 600 meters away. During that reconstruction, archaeologists discovered highly advanced interlocking masonry systems, unusual mortar compounds, and hidden ventilation channels buried inside the walls. The greatest technological mystery surrounding Nalanda Gedige is its mortar. Sri Lanka experiences brutal tropical conditions where annual rainfall in central regions can exceed 1,800 millimeters. Humidity regularly stays above 70%, and biological erosion from roots, moss, fungi, and insects destroys most exposed stone structures over centuries. Yet parts of Nalanda Gedige's bonding material remain remarkably intact after nearly 1,000 years. Modern material scientists studying ancient Asian architecture have compared its durability to Roman pozzolanic concrete, the same technology that allowed Roman harbours to survive underwater for 2 millennia. But unlike Roman concrete, Nalanda Gedige's formula was never documented in surviving historical texts. Microscopic analysis suggests the mixture may have contained high-temperature lime, finely crushed quartz-rich sand, plant resin compounds, organic ash, and clay minerals with hydraulic properties. The mystery deepens because ordinary lime mortar in tropical climates normally deteriorates rapidly through carbonation and water penetration. Yet some internal joints at Nalanda Gedige still show unusually strong adhesion and low moisture infiltration. Researchers from South Asian conservation studies have proposed that ancient builders may have accidentally or intentionally created a proto-hydraulic mortar capable of resisting water absorption. Similar theories exist for Roman marine concrete in Italy, Persian Sarouge waterproof mortar, and Maya lime plasters used in humid jungles. But Nalanda Gedige presents an even stranger puzzle. The mortar appears optimized not only for strength, but also for thermal regulation. Certain wall sections absorb less daytime heat than surrounding reconstructed stone, suggesting the material itself may have helped stabilize internal temperatures. Some engineers believe microscopic air pockets inside the mixture acted as primitive thermal insulation. If true, the builders understood environmental engineering at a level rarely associated with medieval Sri Lanka. Even more mysterious is the disappearance of the technology. Later Sri Lankan structures often use simpler compounds with significantly lower durability, as if the original formula vanished completely from regional knowledge. Nalanda Gediga looks almost alien compared to nearby Sri Lankan Buddhist architecture. Instead of the rounded stupas common to Sinhala construction, the temple resembles South Indian Dravidian shrines built by the Pallava or Chola civilizations. The roof profile, stone corridors, and decorative geometry resemble temples hundreds of kilometers away across the sea, raising a major historical question. How did such advanced cross-cultural engineering appear deep inside Sri Lanka centuries before modern transportation networks? Some historians believe Nalanda Gediga may represent a forgotten fusion center between Buddhist Sri Lanka and Hindu South India, while others argue that traveling guilds of engineers carried architectural knowledge across Indian Ocean trade routes. The precision of the stonework creates another layer of mystery. Several granite blocks fit together with extremely narrow tolerances, and during reconstruction studies, archaeologists found joints so tight that thin metal blades struggled to pass between them. Comparable precision appears in Inca polygonal walls at Machu Picchu, Nabatean stone facades at Petra, Byzantine imperial masonry, and certain Khmer temple foundations. Yet Sri Lanka was not historically known for massive precision stone architecture on this scale. No surviving records explain the measurement systems used to achieve this symmetry. Without lasers, steel tools, or industrial machinery, ancient builders somehow maintained alignment across complex load-bearing stone sections. One of the least discussed mysteries involves structural stability. Nalanda Gediga has survived earthquakes, monsoon cycles, invasive vegetation, and centuries of abandonment, and part of this resilience appears linked to hidden interlocking mechanisms inside the masonry itself. Rather than depending entirely on mortar, many stones distribute weight through carefully angled contact surfaces. Engineers studying the reconstruction observed that some blocks function almost like compression locks, redirecting vertical force sideways across the structure. This principle resembles seismic-resistant engineering seen in Inca walls in Peru, ancient Japanese timber joints, Roman arches, and Himalayan stone monasteries. The strange part is that Sri Lanka has relatively limited evidence of such advanced anti-collapse stone systems elsewhere during the same period. Some experts speculate that builders intentionally designed the structure to withstand tropical soil movement and seasonal expansion caused by moisture fluctuations, while others believe the engineering knowledge may have originated from foreign craftsmen connected to Indian Ocean trade. Either way, the structure demonstrates a level of load distribution understanding far beyond what many assume medieval South Asian builders possessed. Even today, visitors notice that the interior remains cooler than the outside air. Sri Lanka's central regions often exceed 30 degrees Celsius, yet the inner chambers of Nalanda Gediga can feel significantly calmer and less humid. Researchers believe this effect comes from a combination of thick thermal mass walls, narrow airflow channels, shaded stone geometry, and hidden ventilation cavities. Some openings disguised within decorative carvings appear positioned to create natural convection currents, allowing hot air to rise upward while cooler air flows through lower passages, producing passive air circulation without mechanical systems. Modern sustainable architects compare this principle to Persian wind catchers, Egyptian desert ventilation shafts, and Roman bathhouse airflow systems. The remarkable part is that the cooling system is almost invisible because the engineering is embedded directly into the aesthetics of the structure itself. This suggests the builders were not merely artists or religious craftsmen. They understood environmental physics in practical ways centuries before modern climate engineering. Many carvings inside Nalanda Gediga display astonishing geometric balance. Curved surfaces remain unusually smooth despite the hardness of the stone. Symmetrical floral patterns repeat with minimal visible deviation, and certain decorative cuts appear polished rather than roughly chiseled. Experimental archaeologists attempting to reproduce similar finishes using replicated medieval tools found the process extremely time-consuming, with comparable smoothness on hard stone requiring thousands of repetitive abrasion cycles. Some theories suggest ancient craftsmen used quartz sand polishing, bow drill rotary cutting, copper alloy shaping tools, and water-assisted abrasion techniques. But no definitive evidence explains how such consistency was maintained across the entire monument. The lack of obvious tool marks has fueled endless speculation. While mainstream archaeology attributes the craftsmanship to highly skilled artisans, others argue the precision hints at lost construction methods no longer fully understood today. Do you think Nalanda Gediga was simply a religious temple, or evidence of a lost exchange of ancient engineering knowledge between civilizations? Share your thoughts in the comments below. At the center of Rome, Italy, rising approximately 40 meters above the Roman Forum, stands Palatine Hill, one of the most famous archaeological sites in the world. According to Roman tradition, this was the place where Romulus founded Rome in 753 BC. Archaeological investigations began as early as the Renaissance, but major scientific excavations accelerated during the 19th and 20th centuries. What researchers expected to find were the remains of imperial palaces. What they discovered instead was something far more intriguing: evidence of enormous engineering systems hidden beneath centuries of ruins. Today, archaeologists estimate that the imperial complexes covering Palatine Hill once occupied more than 150,000 square meters. Beneath the visible ruins lies a labyrinth of tunnels, foundations, reservoirs, drainage networks, and structural systems that continue to challenge modern understanding of ancient engineering. Most ancient capitals were constructed on relatively stable terrain, but Palatine Hill presented a completely different challenge. Its slopes were irregular, its geology varied from one section to another, and large portions required extensive modification before major construction could begin. Yet Roman emperors transformed the hill into the political center of the empire. Massive complexes such as the Domus Flavia, Domus Augustana, and later imperial palaces stretched across the summit. Modern engineers understand the difficulty of constructing large buildings on uneven terrain because every structure generates pressure on the ground beneath it, and the larger the structure, the greater the risk of settlement, cracking, or collapse. Some walls on Palatine Hill still stand nearly 20 meters high after almost 2,000 years. Even more remarkable, many of the supporting foundations remain structurally stable despite centuries of earthquakes, erosion, and human activity. The mystery is not that the Romans built these structures, but how they calculated the necessary support systems without modern geology, structural analysis software, or advanced surveying equipment. One of the greatest surprises uncovered by archaeologists was the scale of the underground infrastructure. Beneath the palaces lies a vast network of corridors, service passages, storage chambers, drainage systems, and structural galleries. Some tunnels extend for hundreds of meters beneath buildings weighing thousands of tons. In modern architecture, underground construction beneath large structures requires extensive calculations regarding load distribution, ventilation, groundwater control, and long-term stability. The Romans somehow achieved these objectives nearly 2 millennia ago. Researchers continue to debate the original purpose of many underground passages. Some appear to have been used by servants, others likely transported supplies, and certain sections may have functioned as maintenance corridors for water systems and utilities. Yet, significant portions remain poorly understood, and the complete engineering logic of the underground network has never been fully reconstructed. Summer temperatures in Rome regularly exceed 35 degrees Celsius, making the maintenance of comfortable living conditions inside enormous stone structures a major challenge. Evidence from Palatine Hill suggests that Roman architects employed sophisticated passive cooling techniques. Thick walls absorbed heat during the day and released it slowly at night. Courtyards created airflow patterns that encouraged natural ventilation. Water channels running through certain areas may have contributed to cooling effects, while underground chambers likely helped regulate temperature fluctuations. Modern sustainable architecture increasingly employs similar principles. Buildings designed for energy efficiency often rely on thermal mass, natural airflow, and evaporative cooling rather than mechanical air conditioning. This remarkable similarity raises an important question. Did Roman architects gradually discover these principles through centuries of experimentation, or did they possess a more systematic understanding of environmental engineering than historians currently recognize? Perhaps no technological mystery on Palatine Hill is more famous than Roman concrete. Many structures on the hill contain concrete mixtures that have survived for nearly 2,000 years. Some sections remain stronger than many modern equivalents, despite constant exposure to weather and environmental stress. Scientific studies have revealed complex combinations of lime, volcanic ash, aggregate, and mineral reactions occurring over long periods. Recent research suggests that certain Roman concrete formulations may possess self-healing properties, with tiny cracks triggering chemical reactions that gradually seal damaged areas. For comparison, many modern reinforced concrete structures are designed for service lives of roughly 50 to 100 years before major repairs become necessary. Palatine Hill demonstrates durability on a completely different scale. Scientists can identify the ingredients and analyze the chemistry, yet many aspects of the manufacturing process remain uncertain. The exact methods used by Roman builders continue to generate debate among material scientists worldwide. Water was essential for imperial life. The palaces required drinking water, fountains, baths, kitchens, gardens, and sanitation systems, yet Palatine Hill stood above much of the surrounding city. Archaeological excavations have revealed extensive hydraulic infrastructure, including reservoirs, lead pipes, channels, distribution systems, and storage facilities. The challenge was maintaining reliable water delivery across varying elevations. Modern water networks rely heavily on pumps, pressure controls, and monitoring systems, technologies that Roman engineers lacked. Nevertheless, they successfully supplied vast quantities of water to the imperial complex. Researchers still debate the exact operation of several hydraulic components. Some pipe networks appear more sophisticated than expected, while certain reservoirs may have served multiple engineering functions simultaneously. Even after decades of investigation, a complete understanding of the water management system remains elusive. Many of the surviving structures on Palatine Hill showcase Roman mastery of arches and vaults. These curved architectural forms allowed builders to create enormous interior spaces while reducing dependence on dense forests of support columns. The engineering challenge is significant because every arch must distribute forces correctly, and every vault must channel weight toward carefully positioned supports. Small errors can trigger catastrophic failure, Yet many Roman vaults have survived earthquakes, fires, invasions, and centuries of neglect. Some structures continue to stand despite the loss of large sections of supporting material. Modern engineers can model these systems using advanced software, but Roman builders achieved similar results through methods that remain only partially understood. Before construction could begin, the Romans had to measure the terrain. This seemingly simple task may represent one of the greatest mysteries of all. Building complexes covering tens of thousands of square meters required accurate alignment, elevation measurements, drainage planning, and structural positioning. Today, such tasks are performed using GPS systems, laser scanners, digital mapping equipment, and computer-generated models. Roman engineers possessed none of these technologies. Yet archaeological surveys repeatedly reveal extraordinary precision throughout the Palatine complexes. Walls align correctly, drainage gradients function efficiently, and structural relationships remain remarkably consistent. The instruments used by Roman surveyors are known in general terms, but the level of precision they achieved remains difficult to explain fully. Among the most intriguing discoveries on Palatine Hill are the remains of the Domus Transitoria, the first grand palace associated with Emperor Nero. Although much of the structure was destroyed during the Great Fire of AD 64, excavations revealed evidence of remarkable engineering sophistication. The palace featured marble decorations from distant provinces, advanced water features, carefully designed lighting effects, and elaborate interior spaces intended to manipulate perception and movement. Some researchers believe the palace incorporated combinations of water, reflection, architecture, and natural light to create immersive visual experiences unlike anything previously seen in Rome. Unfortunately, much of the structure vanished before detailed documentation could survive. The surviving remains hint at technological capabilities that historians can only partially reconstruct. On the White Cliffs of southeastern England, overlooking the narrowest point of the English Channel, Dover Castle has guarded Britain for nearly 2,000 years. Only 34 kilometres separate Dover from continental Europe, making this one of the most strategically important military positions in Western history. But beneath its medieval walls lies something far stranger. Evidence that multiple civilizations may have possessed engineering knowledge far beyond what historians once believed. The site was first identified by Roman forces shortly after the invasion of Britain in 43 AD. Archaeological excavations revealed Roman foundations, signal systems, deep wells, military storage chambers, and one of the oldest surviving Roman lighthouses in the world. Yet the more researchers studied Dover Castle, the more impossible its survival began to seem. The fortress stands on unstable chalk cliffs, constantly exposed to salt air, rain, wind erosion, and geological movement. Modern concrete structures near coastlines often deteriorate within decades due to chloride penetration and moisture damage. Yet parts of Dover's Roman masonry have survived almost 20 centuries. Even more mysterious are the underground tunnel systems, shock-resistant defensive walls, hidden water technologies, and optical communication networks that appear centuries ahead of their time. What exactly did the builders of Dover Castle understand about engineering, geology, and military science? And why do some of its technologies resemble concepts used in modern defense systems? Inside the castle complex stands the Roman Pharos, built sometime during the 1st century AD. Originally nearly 24 meters tall, it served as a navigational lighthouse for Roman ships crossing the Channel. Today, it remains one of the best preserved Roman structures in Britain. The mystery is not merely its age. It is the fact that it still exists at all. Coastal structures face some of the harshest environmental conditions on Earth. Salt water accelerates chemical weathering, while freezing temperatures expand microscopic cracks inside stone. Over centuries, these cycles normally destroy ancient masonry, yet large sections of the pharaohs remain structurally stable after nearly 2,000 years. Scientific analysis suggests the Romans used a sophisticated lime mortar mixed with crushed ceramic fragments. This mixture created a pozzolanic reaction, a chemical process similar to modern hydraulic cement. When exposed to moisture, the material continued hardening over time rather than weakening. Modern researchers comparing Roman concrete with modern Portland cement discovered something astonishing. Some Roman marine concretes show lower long-term cracking rates than many modern materials. In certain studies, Roman harbour concrete demonstrated exceptional resistance to seawater due to mineral growth within microscopic fractures. At Dover, this ancient chemistry may explain why Roman sections survived while later medieval repairs deteriorated faster. The engineering precision is equally strange. The lighthouse walls gradually taper upward, reducing stress loads while maintaining stability against powerful channel winds. This principle resembles load distribution calculations still used in modern tower construction. Some historians argue the Romans simply relied on experience. Others believe they possessed a practical understanding of material science far more advanced than previously assumed. Beneath Dover Castle lies a massive tunnel system carved deep into chalk bedrock. Some tunnels were expanded during the Napoleonic Wars and World War II, but archaeologists believe portions may follow much older underground routes dating back to medieval or even Roman military activity. The engineering problem is enormous. Chalk is relatively soft and vulnerable to collapse when exposed to moisture or vibration. Modern tunneling projects in chalk formations require extensive reinforcement systems, yet many sections beneath Dover remained stable for centuries with surprisingly limited structural support. Researchers studying the tunnels noticed something unusual about their geometry. Certain corridors curve slightly instead of following straight lines. At first, historians assumed this was due to primitive excavation methods, but structural engineers later proposed another explanation. Curved tunnels distribute stress waves more effectively than perfectly straight passages. This means the tunnel system may have been intentionally designed to reduce collapse risk from impacts, vibrations, or enemy attacks. Similar concepts appear in modern blast-resistant military bunkers. Ventilation is another unresolved mystery. Deep underground chambers normally suffer from humidity buildup, oxygen depletion, and toxic smoke accumulation. Yet several Dover tunnel sections demonstrate surprisingly effective passive airflow. Temperature differences between upper and lower shafts may have created natural air circulation systems similar to those later used in underground fortresses during the Second World War. Comparisons have even been made to the underground cities of Cappadocia in Turkey, where ancient builders engineered airflow systems advanced enough to support thousands of people below ground. How medieval or Roman engineers understood these geological principles without modern instruments remains unclear. Dover Castle's defensive walls contain another engineering mystery. Many wall segments are not perfectly straight. For centuries, historians believed this resulted from inconsistent medieval construction. But modern military analysis suggests these irregular angles may have been intentional. Straight walls concentrate impact energy when struck by siege weapons. Slightly angled surfaces help disperse force across a larger area, reducing catastrophic collapse. This principle resembles modern ballistic deflection systems used in armored vehicles. The internal structure of the walls is equally sophisticated. Outer stone layers surround a core filled with rubble, mortar, and smaller stones. This layer design behaves similarly to composite materials, combining rigidity with shock absorption. When trebuchets launch projectiles weighing over 100 kilograms at medieval fortifications, most walls cracked at stress concentration points. Yet parts of Dover's fortifications absorbed repeated impacts without total structural failure. Some engineers compare the concept to earthquake-resistant masonry systems, where controlled flexibility prevents sudden collapse. The fortress also uses elevation strategically. Positioned approximately 110 meters above sea level, Dover Castle dominates both coastline and inland approaches. This height advantage created overlapping defensive sightlines capable of detecting enemy movement far earlier than lower fortresses. Military historians later called Dover the key to England. But the deeper question remains: how did medieval builders intuitively understand structural mechanics centuries before formal engineering science existed? Dover's location allowed direct visual communication across vast distances. Long before telegraphs or radio, this fortress may have operated as part of an advanced optical signalling network stretching across southern Britain. Evidence of beacon platforms and fire warning systems exists throughout the region. Roman and later Saxon defences likely used elevated signal fires to transmit military alerts between coastal positions. But some researchers suspect the system was far more sophisticated than simple fires. Experimental reconstructions showed that beacon chains under clear conditions could relay warnings across hundreds of kilometers within minutes. Variations in flame timing, intensity, or sequence may have functioned as coded messages, essentially an ancient form of optical telegraphy. The concept resembles later semaphore systems developed in 18th century Europe. Yet Dover's signalling traditions may predate them by over 1,000 years. Roman military manuals also describe coordinated communication networks using mirrors, torches, and elevated towers. Combined with Dover's strategic position facing continental Europe, the fortress may have served as an intelligence and surveillance hub far beyond what historians traditionally imagined. If true, Dover Castle was not merely a fortress. It was part of an ancient information network. One of the greatest challenges for any medieval fortress was water. Without reliable water access, even the strongest castle could fall during siege warfare. Yet Dover Castle maintained long-term survivability despite sitting atop highly porous chalk terrain where rainwater drains rapidly underground. Ancient engineers solved this problem through deep wells cut directly into bedrock. Some wells descend more than 100 feet into the chalk aquifer below. Excavating vertically through unstable rock using ancient tools required astonishing precision. A small directional error could miss underground water sources entirely. Modern hydrogeologists believe ancient builders may have identified groundwater through subtle environmental clues. Vegetation patterns, humidity changes, mineral deposits, or seasonal temperature differences in rock fissures. The system also included rainwater collection and storage technologies designed to minimize contamination during siege conditions. This was critically important because disease often killed more defenders than enemy attacks. Compared to many medieval cities suffering from polluted water systems, Dover's infrastructure appears unusually advanced and strategically planned. Discovered running southeast from Rome across the Italian peninsula, the Appian Way was first ordered in 312 BC by the Roman censor Appius Claudius Caecus. What began as a military road eventually stretched more than 580 kilometers toward Brindisi, becoming the most important transportation artery of the Roman Republic and later the Empire. Yet the real mystery is not its age. It is the fact that large sections of the road still survive after more than 2,300 years, while many modern highways collapse within decades. Beneath its massive basalt stones lies one of the greatest unsolved engineering achievements of the ancient world. The first thing archaeologists noticed about the Appian Way was that it was built nothing like ordinary ancient roads. Excavations revealed a multi-layered structure almost identical to modern highway engineering. Roman builders first compacted earth, then added large stones, smaller gravel, lime mortar, volcanic ash concrete, and finally massive polygonal basalt slabs on top. In some sections, the total depth exceeds 1 meter. The road was also slightly curved upward at the center, allowing rainwater to drain naturally toward the sides. Modern civil engineers call this a camber system, and it remains standard in highway construction today. What makes this shocking is the lifespan comparison. Modern asphalt roads often require major repairs after 15 to 25 years due to cracking, water infiltration, and thermal expansion. Some concrete highways last around 40 years before reconstruction becomes necessary. The Appian Way has endured earthquakes, floods, wars, and millions of travelers for over 2 millennia. Certain segments near Rome still preserve their original paving stones. Researchers studying stress distribution found that the Roman layered design absorbed pressure more efficiently than many rigid modern road systems. Instead of resisting movement completely, the structure flexed slightly under weight and vibration, reducing catastrophic cracking. The basalt stones themselves present another mystery. Many slabs weigh several hundred kilograms, while others exceed 1 ton. Yet they were transported across long distances without engines, cranes, or hydraulic machinery. Ancient Roman records describe carts, pulleys, wooden rollers, and animal labor, but historians still debate how such an enormous logistical operation maintained precision across hundreds of kilometers. Some stones fit together so tightly that even modern measuring blades struggle to pass between them. Archaeologists have found wheel ruts carved into the stone surfaces, proving centuries of intense traffic. Despite this wear, much of the road remained structurally stable. The precision of Roman surveying adds another layer to the mystery. The Appian Way is famous for its unusually straight alignment. Instead of following natural terrain, Roman engineers cut through hills, drained marshes, and constructed elevated foundations to preserve direct routes. Achieving this across hundreds of kilometers without satellite mapping or laser equipment seems almost impossible by ancient standards. Roman surveyors used tools such as the groma for straight lines and the chorobates for leveling. However, the accuracy they achieved continues to astonish researchers. Some sections deviate only slightly over vast distances. Modern archaeologists, comparing Roman roads with early modern European roads, discovered that many medieval routes were actually less precise, despite being built more than 1,000 years later. This suggests Roman engineering knowledge may have been partially lost after the fall of the empire. One of the greatest unsolved technological mysteries surrounding the Appian Way is Roman concrete. Unlike modern Portland cement, Roman concrete used volcanic ash called pozzolana mixed with lime and water. Recent scientific studies reveal that this material behaves in ways modern concrete does not. Microscopic analysis found rare mineral crystals known as aluminous tobermorite forming inside ancient Roman concrete over centuries. These crystals actually strengthen the material over time. In 2017, researchers studying Roman marine concrete discovered that seawater interacting with volcanic ash triggered chemical reactions that continuously reinforced the structure. Instead of weakening with age like most modern concrete, Roman mixtures sometimes became stronger. Scientists estimate that modern concrete structures may last around 50 to 120 years under heavy environmental stress. Certain Roman structures have survived for nearly 2,000 years or more. This has led engineers to investigate Roman formulas as a potential solution for sustainable low-carbon construction. The Appian Way also demonstrates advanced understanding of drainage and soil mechanics. Several parts of the road crossed wetlands and unstable terrain. Rather than placing stones directly onto mud, Roman builders constructed thick load distribution foundations underneath. In some marshy regions, they elevated the roadway using compacted layers that dispersed pressure outward, reducing sinking. This resembles principles used in modern geotechnical engineering. Researchers studying subsurface deformation discovered that some road sections settled gradually and evenly rather than cracking apart. This flexibility may explain why portions of the Appian Way survived earthquakes that destroyed younger buildings nearby. The layered structure distributed seismic energy instead of concentrating stress into rigid fracture points. Similar principles are now used in earthquake-resistant architecture, but the mysteries surrounding the Appian Way extend below the surface. Along the road lies an enormous network of tombs, catacombs, and underground chambers. The catacombs of San Callisto alone contain roughly 20 kilometers of underground passageways spread across multiple levels. These tunnels were excavated with remarkable structural stability despite primitive tools and limited lighting. What puzzles researchers is the ventilation system. Air circulation inside many catacombs remains surprisingly effective even today. Some shafts appear positioned to create natural airflow through pressure differences between chambers. Whether this was intentional engineering or accidental design remains debated. The underground environment also preserved frescoes, inscriptions, and burial chambers for nearly 2,000 years despite humidity and temperature fluctuations. Another strange aspect is the durability of materials used near the catacombs. Roman mortar exposed to moisture underground often remained intact far longer than expected. Modern cement exposed to constant humidity frequently deteriorates through sulfate attack and cracking, yet many Roman underground structures still maintain cohesion. Chemical analysis suggests that volcanic minerals inside the mortar reacted slowly with groundwater, sealing microfractures over time. The sheer scale of the Appian Way raises logistical questions that remain difficult to answer. Building more than 580 kilometers of engineered roadway required staggering amounts of stone, labor, food, tools, and organization. Historians estimate tens of thousands of workers may have participated over several generations. Coordinating transportation, quarry operations, drainage systems, and surveying across such distances would challenge even modern infrastructure projects. The road transformed the Roman military machine. Armies could march up to 30 kilometers per day along stable paved surfaces. Supply wagons moved faster and more reliably than on dirt tracks. Communication across the Republic accelerated dramatically. Some historians argue the Appian Way helped Rome dominate the Mediterranean not only through military strength, but through engineering superiority. Yet perhaps the most unsettling mystery is how advanced Roman infrastructure truly was compared to later civilizations. After the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, Europe lost the ability to maintain many of these roads properly. Some engineering methods vanished for centuries. Medieval roads often became muddy, uneven, and seasonally unusable despite existing in a supposedly more advanced historical era. Perched on a strategic hill overlooking the confluence of the Mtkvari and Aragvi rivers near modern Mtsketa, Georgia, approximately 20 kilometers northwest of Tbilisi, Almazi was one of the most important centers of the ancient kingdom of Iberia. The site was first identified through historical records and archaeological investigations conducted throughout the 20th century. Excavations revealed the remains of a fortified royal city that served as one of the political and religious centers of the powerful Caucasian state that flourished between Rome and Persia. At first glance, Almazi appears to be just another ruined fortress. Yet beneath its collapsed walls lies evidence of engineering knowledge that continues to puzzle archaeologists today. The city occupied one of the most strategically important locations in the Caucasus, controlling trade routes that connected Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. More importantly, its builders solved a series of technological challenges that remain only partially understood nearly 2,000 years later. Almazi occupied a naturally defensive position atop a steep rocky hill. From its summit, observers could monitor movement along major river valleys stretching for dozens of kilometers. Such a location provided military advantages, but it also created enormous engineering problems. Every stone block, every construction material, every food supply, and every drop of water had to be transported uphill. Modern engineers understand how difficult such logistics become even with machinery. Yet Amazi's builders accomplished this on a large scale using only ancient technology. The challenge becomes even more impressive when compared with other hilltop centers of the ancient world. The builders of Machu Picchu in Peru faced similar transportation problems. The craters of Masada in Israel encountered comparable logistical obstacles. Yet Amazi emerged centuries earlier as one of the Caucasus region's most important political centers. The question is simple. How did its builders manage such a complex construction project with the technological resources available at the time? One of the most fascinating mysteries of Amazi involves its defensive walls. Excavations reveal massive fortification systems built from carefully fitted stone blocks. Some sections display construction techniques resembling those used throughout the Roman world. Others appear closer to Persian traditions. Still others contain local innovations unlike either major civilization. This hybrid engineering approach creates a puzzle. Amazi's builders were not merely copying foreign methods, they were selectively combining technologies from multiple cultures and adapting them to local conditions. Some surviving wall segments demonstrate remarkable durability, despite nearly 2 millennia of earthquakes, weathering, warfare, and abandonment. Geological studies show that eastern Georgia experiences significant seismic activity, yet portions of the fortification survived long after many younger structures disappeared. Researchers continue debating whether the builders intentionally incorporated earthquake-resistant design principles or whether the resilience emerged accidentally through experience and experimentation. Without surviving engineering manuals, the answer remains unknown. The Caucasus Mountains sit within one of the world's most complex tectonic regions. The Arabian and Eurasian plates continue interacting beneath the landscape, generating frequent seismic activity. This creates a major mystery. Ancient builders had no seismographs, no geological models, and lacked modern structural analysis software. Yet, some of Amazi's surviving foundations exhibit characteristics that engineers often associate with seismic resilience. Several wall systems appear designed to distribute loads across wider surfaces. Certain stone blocks show evidence of carefully controlled placement rather than random stacking. In some areas, the builders seem to have prioritized flexibility over rigidity. Modern earthquake engineering frequently relies upon allowing structures to absorb movement, rather than resisting it completely. Could Amazi's architects have discovered similar principles through centuries of observation? No written evidence survives to confirm the theory, but the physical remains continue raising questions. Perhaps the most overlooked mystery involves transportation. The construction of Amazi required enormous quantities of stone. Archaeologists estimate that thousands of tons of material were moved during various construction phases. Even today, transporting such weight uphill would require significant planning. Ancient engineers faced additional obstacles. No diesel engines, no hydraulic cranes, no steel cables, and no modern roads. Yet massive blocks somehow reach the summit. The same mystery appears at many famous archaeological sites. The builders of Baalbek transported stone blocks weighing hundreds of tons. The craters of Stonehenge moved stones across vast distances. The engineers of the Egyptian pyramids relocated millions of limestone blocks. Amazi belongs to this broader category of ancient logistical puzzles. Researchers suspect combinations of ramps, rollers, sledges, manpower, and animal power were involved. However, direct evidence remains surprisingly scarce. The exact methods have vanished, but the results remain. A fortress without water is not a fortress. This reality creates one of Almazy's most intriguing engineering mysteries. The city stood high above nearby rivers. During peacetime, transporting water uphill would have been difficult. During warfare, dependence on external water sources could prove catastrophic. Excavations uncovered reservoirs, channels, storage facilities, and hydraulic infrastructure, suggesting sophisticated water management. The problem is that archaeologists still do not fully understand how the entire system functioned. How was water collected? How much could be stored? How long could the city survive under siege? Modern military historians note that water logistics often determine the fate of ancient fortresses. A city capable of storing hundreds of thousands of litres gained a major strategic advantage. Some researchers believe Almazy's water systems were considerably more advanced than surviving remains suggest. If true, much of the infrastructure may still lie buried beneath the site. Archaeological investigations revealed extensive palace structures within Almazy. The foundations indicate large ceremonial and administrative buildings. These structures required careful planning, load distribution, and architectural coordination. Today, engineers use advanced calculations to determine structural stability. Ancient builders did not, or at least they lacked our mathematical tools, yet they repeatedly constructed buildings that remained standing for centuries. This pattern appears across the ancient world. Roman engineers built the Pantheon with its 43-meter dome. Egyptian builders erected pyramids containing millions of stone blocks. The architects of Petra carved entire monuments into solid rock. Almazy's builders operated on a smaller scale but confronted many of the same engineering challenges. The knowledge required clearly existed, but the documentation largely disappeared. The Kingdom of Iberia occupied a region rich in mineral resources. Archaeological discoveries throughout Georgia demonstrate extensive metalworking traditions dating back thousands of years. Iron tools, weapons, and production evidence suggest sophisticated metallurgical expertise. Producing iron is far more difficult than most people realize. Furnaces must exceed temperatures approaching 1,200 degrees Celsius. Airflow must be carefully regulated. Fuel quality must remain consistent. Ore composition must be understood. Even slight errors can ruin an entire production cycle. Experimental archaeologists attempting to recreate ancient furnaces frequently discover that seemingly simple systems conceal surprisingly advanced engineering principles. The craftsmen of Almazy almost certainly possessed practical knowledge of heat management, combustion dynamics, and material behavior. Yet virtually none of their technical instructions survive. Like many ancient technologies, the products remain while the knowledge behind them vanished. One of the most important discoveries associated with the site involves inscriptions written in the so-called Almazy script. These texts reveal evidence of administration, governance, diplomacy, and political organization. This creates another mystery. Complex states require information systems, taxation requires records, construction projects require coordination, military operations require communication, trade requires accounting. Almazy clearly possessed these capabilities, yet only fragments survive. It is possible that thousands of documents once existed within the kingdom. Most were likely written on perishable materials that disappeared centuries ago. If those records survived, they might answer many of the engineering questions surrounding the city. Instead, archaeologists are left reconstructing the past from scattered clues.